Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into the life of a Viking, but perhaps not the one you immediately picture. We're following your journey from a fjordside farm to the shield wall and beyond, as a young woman carving her own path in a harsh, vibrant world. The air around you is biting, sharp with the tang of salt and pine, and the distant roar of the North Sea is a constant, sometimes menacing lullaby. This isn't some romanticised fantasy. This is a world where survival is a daily victory. And honestly, you probably won't survive this without at least a few close calls and maybe a mild case of scurvy if you forget your cloudberries. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You awaken not to a gentle sunrise filtering through fine linen curtains, but to the insistent bleating of a goat somewhere very near your head, and the rough texture of a woolen blanket against your cheek. The air in the longhouse is thick with the smells of sleep, old wood smoke, and the faint, earthy aroma of the livestock that sometimes share a section of this communal dwelling, especially during the harshest winter nights. Your alarm clock is a rooster with a personal vendetta against sleep, or possibly your mother Astrid, whose voice, sharp and practical, cuts through the morning gloom, listing chores before your eyes are even fully open. You're young, perhaps 10 or 11 summers old, and life on this small farmstead, nestled at the edge of a deep green-watered fjord, is all you've ever known. Your world is a tapestry woven from the towering snow-capped mountains that loom like stern old gods behind your home, the dark, whispering pine forests that creep down their slopes, and the ever-present sighing sea that stretches out before you, a gateway to unimaginable elsewhere. Days are measured by the tides and the seasons, by the work that needs doing. You stretch, your small body already accustomed to the chill that seems to cling to the packed earth floor even in summer. Your first task is often to fetch water from the stream that tumbles down from the hills, its water so cold it makes your teeth ache. You pull on your simple tunic, likely made of coarse wool dyed with whatever plants your mother could find, perhaps a muted yellow from weld or a soft brown from walnut husks. Your shoes are simple leather, worn soft with use. Outside, the air is crisp and clean, carrying the scent of damp earth and the promise of the day. You see your father Eric already out by the small rickety pier, checking the fishing nets with your older brother Bjorn. Their movements are economical, born of long practice. The farmstead isn't grand. It's a collection of sturdy wooden buildings, their timbers weathered to a silver grey by wind and salt spray. The main longhouse, where your family and perhaps a couple of thralls sleep and eat, is the heart of it all. It's a single long room, smoky from the central fire pit, its rafters dark and soot-stained. Tools hang from the walls, alongside bundles of drying herbs and perhaps a few shields. A constant reminder of a wider, more dangerous world. You help your mother with the milking of the shaggy hardy cows and the even more stubborn goats, your small hands learning the rhythm of the task. You feed the chickens, scatter grain for the geese, and learn to churn butter, your arms aching from the repetitive motion. It's not all drudgery, though. There are moments of quiet beauty, like watching the sun paint the fjord in hues of orange and pink, or the thrill of finding a patch of sweet wild berries in the woods. You play with your younger siblings, engaging in mock battles with wooden swords, your imaginations fueled by the heroic tales the adults tell around the fire on long, dark evenings. These are stories of gods and giants, of brave warriors and cunning tricksters, stories that shape your understanding of the world and your place within it. One of your most treasured lessons comes not from the hard work of the farm, but from your grandmother, Sigrid. Her hands are gnarled like old tree roots, but her eyes are bright and knowing. She is the keeper of stories, and also the keeper of the runes. In quiet moments, often by the flickering light of a tallow candle, she teaches you the strange angular shapes of the elder Futhark. Each rune, she explains, is not just a letter, but a symbol of power, a key to understanding the hidden forces of the world. You trace them with a pointed stick in the dirt, or carefully scratch them onto scraps of wood. Fehu, for wealth and cattle, Yuruz, for strength, Thurizaz, for protection. You try to carve a rune for more sleep, but it just ends up looking like a confused stick figure. Odin clearly isn't taking requests for that particular boon. Learning the runes isn't like learning to read a book in the way we understand it now. For you, it's about connecting with something ancient and potent. It's said that Odin himself hung upon the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, to gain the wisdom of the runes. So you treat them with a mixture of curiosity and reverence. Your grandmother shows you how runes can be used to mark property to invoke good fortune, or even to lay a curse, though she warns you sternly against such dark uses. This knowledge, whispered and sacred, feels like a secret thread connecting you to the magic that underpins the visible world. Life here is raw, and you learn early that it can be unforgiving. Sickness can sweep through a household, a bad harvest can mean a hungry winter, and the sea, while a provider, is also a taker. You see animals born, and you see them slaughtered for food. It's a practical, unsentimental existence. Yet there's a strong sense of community. Families rely on each other, and your longhouse, while basic, is a central feature of Viking life. These structures, often built from timber with wattle and daub walls and turf roofs, could be impressively large, sometimes over 50 metres long, housing not just an extended family, but also their livestock in a separate partitioned area, especially in the colder months. It's a bit like a studio apartment, but with more goats and fewer complaints about the Wi-Fi. Despite the harsh realities, Vikings were surprisingly attentive to their personal hygiene, a quirky tidbit that often surprises people. Archaeological finds include tweezers, razors, combs, and even ear spoons, which are exactly what they sound like, showing a concern for cleanliness and grooming. So, while you might be mucking out the goat pen, you'd likely have a comb carved from bone or antler to tidy your hair afterwards. Historians still argue whether the widespread portrayal of Viking helmets with horns has any basis in reality, or if it's purely a 19th century invention for Wagnerian operas. Most evidence points to the latter. Actual Viking helmets were typically simple, skullcap-like designs, far more practical for battle. So if you were planning on accessorising your battle look with some impressive headgear later in life, you might be stuck with, well, just your really cool braided hair and a very functional unhorned helmet. Your childhood, then, is a blend of toil and wonder, of practical skills and whispered magic. You are learning to read the weather in the sky, the turn of the seasons in the changing light, and the secrets of survival from the land and the sea. The runes are taking root in your mind, not just as symbols, but as a language of power. And always the fjord calls, its vastness hinting at a world far beyond your small sheltered farm. The scent of adventure, like the salt on the wind, is already beginning to stir in your young heart, even if you don't yet have the words for it. The summers pass in a rhythm of sun and work, each one adding a little more height to your frame, a little more strength to your limbs. You're perhaps 12 or 13 now, adept at the tasks of the farmstead, your knowledge of herbs and runes slowly growing under your grandmother's tutelage. You can gut a fish with practiced ease, spin wool into a passable thread, and even help your father mend nets, your fingers becoming nimble and strong. But a new sound begins to filter into your world, a sound far more compelling than the bleating of goats or the rhythmic thump of the butter churn. It's the clang of metal on metal, the percussive thud of wood against wood, the grunts and shouts of exertion. It starts subtly. Sometimes, down by the wider, flatter stretch of beach beyond the pier, your brother Bjorn and some of the other young men from nearby farms gather. They are older than you, teenagers on the cusp of manhood, their voices cracking and their movements still occasionally clumsy. At first they practice with stout wooden staves, mimicking the movements of spear and axe. You watch them from a distance, perhaps while pretending to gather driftwood or check crab pots. There's an energy to their movements, a focused intensity that captivates you. It's so different from the repetitive, albeit necessary labour of the farm. This feels purposeful, in a way that mucking out the byre, however essential, never quite does. Their shouts are less, "I'm honing my martial prowess," and more, "Ow, my thumb." But the intent is there. One day, a small trading cog, not much bigger than a large fishing boat, puts into your fjord. It's not an uncommon sight. Traders often seek shelter or fresh water, sometimes bartering small goods. But this time, along with the usual merchant smelling of tar and foreign spices, A few warriors are aboard, their leather-clad forms and the glint of steel at their hips marking them as different. They are on their way to join a local chieftain a few fjords over, and while their vessel undergoes minor repairs, they decide to use the downtime for practice. This is different from watching Bjorn and his friends. These are seasoned men. Their movements are fluid, economical, deadly. They set up a makeshift practice area on that same stretch of beach. You, along with other children and even some adults from your settlement, gather at a respectful distance to watch. The sun glints off their blunted practice swords, actual metal, not just wood, and the heavy thuds as they strike practice shields, round and brightly painted, echo across the water. The warriors grunt, they swear under their breath, just loud enough for you to learn some exciting new vocabulary. They occasionally laugh a booming laugh when a feint works particularly well, or a clumsy move earns a playful clout. The smell of sweat, leather, and something vaguely metallic hangs in the air, a strangely alluring perfume of effort and danger. It's certainly a step up from the usual farm aromas, which mostly consist of damp sheep and what is that smell coming from the midden heap? You watch, utterly mesmerised. The way they move, a dance of feints and parries, the sudden explosion of power in a strike, the unwavering focus in their eyes. One warrior, broad-shouldered with a scar bisecting one eyebrow, wields a practice axe with terrifying speed and precision. It whirls and bites, a silver blur, and you imagine it not as blunted steel but as a keen edge. Your heart thuds in your chest, a counterpoint to the rhythm of their combat. This isn't like the stories your grandmother tells, which, while thrilling, always feel a little distant. This is real, immediate, visceral. Viking children, in fact, often engaged in games and activities that honed skills useful in warfare. Wrestling, running, swimming, and mock fighting with sticks were common pastimes, essentially an early form of physical education, preparing them for the rigours of adult life, which for many men and some women included combat. So, your fascination isn't entirely out of place, but the intensity of your focus, the yearning that begins to unfurl within you, feels unique, personal. It's like everyone else is watching a sporting event, and you're watching your future career path unfold. You see the discipline, the sheer physical strength required. You see the camaraderie too, the way they clap each other on the shoulder after a bout, offering gruff advice or a shared swig of water from a skin. They move as individuals, yet there's a sense of a unit, a shared purpose. You contrast it with your own life, fetching water, weeding the small vegetable patch, the endless mending. It's not that you dislike your life, not entirely. There's security in it, a known pattern. But watching these warriors, a seed of dissatisfaction, or perhaps ambition, begins to sprout. It's the difference between a flickering candle and a bonfire. Later, when the warriors have packed up and the beach is quiet again, you sneak down there. The sand is scuffed and trampled. You pick up a discarded piece of splintered wood, roughly the length of a short sword. You try to mimic the stances you saw, the way they held their bodies. You feel awkward, foolish. Your movements are clumsy, unbalanced. You swing the stick, trying to replicate the warrior's axe play, and nearly fall over. Your arm aches after only a few attempts. It's a lot harder than it looks, clearly. Those warriors probably don't have to worry about accidentally whacking a prize-winning turnip during practice. Bjorn finds you there. He doesn't tease, not exactly. He watches you for a moment, a strange look on his face, a mixture of amusement and something else, perhaps a flicker of understanding. "It's not as easy as it looks, little sister," he says, not unkindly. He shows you a basic guard stance, how to hold your imaginary shield to protect your body. He even spars with you for a few moments, using his hands to gently bat away your wild swings, showing you how easily you leave yourself open. It's frustrating, but also exhilarating. That brief, playful exchange of blows, even with him holding back immensely, is a taste of something new. He tells you that a warrior's most important weapon isn't the axe or the sword, but their eyes and their footing. Easy for him to say, he's not the one about to trip over a crab. The whispers of steel have truly entered your soul now. You start paying more attention when the men talk of raids or local disputes. You listen more intently to the sagas, not just for the thrilling plots, but for the descriptions of battle, of strategy, of courage. Historians still argue whether formal Viking training establishments existed, or if martial skills were primarily passed down informally within families and communities, supplemented by the harsh lessons of actual combat. For you, at this moment, it doesn't matter how one learns. The only thing that matters is the growing certainty that you must learn. You begin to carry yourself differently, trying to emulate the purposeful stride of the warriors you saw. You start practicing with your wooden stick in secret, in the quiet woods behind your farmstead, using trees as your opponents. You try to build your strength, lifting heavier rocks than necessary, offering to carry the fullest buckets of water. Your mother notices, of course. She watches you with a worried frown, occasionally muttering about unladylike behaviour and the importance of finding a good husband. But your father, Eric, sometimes catches your eye, and you see a flicker of something unreadable there. Pride, concern, or perhaps just perhaps a grudging respect for the fire he sees in you. A quirky tidbit from this era is that some Viking warriors, even high-status ones, were buried with everyday tools alongside their weapons, suggesting that martial prowess and practical skills were not mutually exclusive, but rather complementary aspects of a well-rounded individual. So, your ability to mend a net or churn butter wouldn't necessarily be seen as a detriment to your warrior aspirations, though convincing your mother of this might be another battle entirely. The image of the scarred warrior with his whistling practice axe is burned into your memory. The feeling of Bjorn's hand deflecting your clumsy attack, the brief, thrilling connection of mock combat, these sensations become a quiet obsession. The path of a farm girl, of marriage and children and endless chores, suddenly feels too small, too constricting. The call to adventure, the whisper of steel, is no longer a gentle suggestion. It's a growing roar, a demand that resonates deep within your bones, pulling you towards a future you can't yet clearly see, but desperately want to seize. The question is how. The seed of ambition, planted by the sight of those visiting warriors, and watered by your secret practice sessions, begins to grow with fierce determination. You are perhaps 14 or 15 now, old enough, in the eyes of your society, for marriage proposals to start being considered, for your future to be mapped out along traditional lines. Your mother, Astrid, certainly has her eye on a suitable match. Perhaps the son of a prosperous farmer from the next fjord, a steady lad with a good boat and a respectable number of sheep. The thought fills you with a dull dread, a sense of a door closing on a life you haven't even had a chance to explore. Every mention of dowries or alliances feels like another strand in a net tightening around you. The whispers of steel are no longer whispers. They're a constant hum beneath the surface of your days. You continue your clandestine training in the woods, your stick now worn smooth by your grip. You've learned to move with more balance, your imaginary blows landing with more force against the unyielding trunks of pine trees. You run, you climb, you push your body, feeling a fierce satisfaction as your muscles harden and your stamina increases. You even try to fashion a crude practice shield from an old barrel lid, strapping it to your arm with leather thongs. It's clumsy and heavy, but it feels right. You're probably single-handedly responsible for a significant reduction in the local squirrel population's peace of mind with all your woodland thrashing. The moment of decision arrives, as such moments often do, not with a grand pronouncement, but with a quiet conversation that holds the weight of your entire future. It's a late summer evening. The sky is streaked with the lingering colours of sunset, and the air is cool and still. Your father, Eric, is sitting outside the longhouse, sharpening a hunting spear by the light of a flickering oil lamp. He's a man of few words, his face weathered by sun and sea, but his eyes are keen and observant. He has seen your restless energy, your unusual dedication to physical tasks far beyond what is normally expected of a girl your age. You approach him, your heart hammering against your ribs. This is it. You've rehearsed the words in your head 100 times, but now they feel inadequate, clumsy. "Father," you begin, your voice a little shaky. He looks up, his hands momentarily stilling their work on the spear. You tell him. You speak of the fire that burns within you, of your desire not for a husband and a hearth, but for a shield and an axe. You speak of your yearning to see the world beyond the fjord, to test your strength, to carve your own name into the sagas, not just be a footnote in someone else's. You speak of the warriors on the beach and how watching them felt like looking at your own destiny. You expect him to laugh or to scold you or to dismiss your words as childish fancy. He listens in silence, his gaze fixed on your face. When you finally fall silent, The only sound is the distant cry of a seabird and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. For a long moment he says nothing. Then he sighs, a deep, weary sound. "This is not a life for a woman, child," he says, his voice quiet but firm. "It is a life of hardship, of danger, of blood and death." "I know," you reply, your voice gaining a little strength. "But it is the life I choose." "And your mother?" he asks. "She will not understand. She will fear for you." "I will speak to her," you say, though the thought of that conversation makes your stomach clench. "But this is my path, father. I cannot walk another." Eric looks out towards the darkening fjord. He himself had been a raider in his younger days before settling down to farm. He knows the lure of the sea, the thrill of battle, the camaraderie of the shield wall. Perhaps he sees a reflection of his own youthful spirit in your determined eyes. Historians still argue about the prevalence and societal acceptance of Shieldmaidens. While sagas and some historical accounts mention women fighting as warriors, the extent to which this was a widespread reality or a more legendary exceptional role is a subject of ongoing debate. Some scholars believe they were rare but real, others that they are largely figures of myth and storytelling, perhaps reflecting strong female archetypes rather than a common profession. Finally, Eric turns back to you. "The sagas tell of Shieldmaidens," he says slowly, "women who fought with the courage of any man. Lagertha, Brynhilda, fierce women. But those are old tales," he pauses. "If this is truly your heart's desire, then I will not stand in your way. But you must understand the cost. You will be an outsider. You will have to prove yourself 10 times over. Many will mock you. Many will doubt you. Are you prepared for that?" Tears prick your eyes, tears of relief and gratitude. But you blink them back. "I am," you say, your voice thick with emotion. "Then you will need more than a stick and a barrel lid," he says, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Come." He rises and leads you into the longhouse. From a heavy wooden chest tucked away in a corner, he pulls out an old leather-wrapped bundle. He unwraps it carefully. Inside lies a shield, smaller than the ones the men usually carried, but sturdily made of linden wood, its boss dented and scarred. And beside it, a small one-handed axe, its haft smooth with age, its steel edge still keen despite years of disuse. "This was your grandmother's," he says, his voice softer now. "Not Sigrid. My mother. She had a warrior's heart too, though her path was different." You stare at the weapons, your breath catching in your throat. This is a profound moment. Your grandmother, a warrior. It's a piece of family history you never knew, a secret connection that makes your choice feel even more fated. The existence of such heirlooms suggests that while perhaps not common, the idea of a woman possessing and potentially using weapons was not entirely alien. A quirky tidbit. Some Viking women were buried with keys, not to doors, but symbolic items often interpreted as representing their status and control over the household. However, occasionally, items more associated with male graves, like certain tools or even weapons, have been found with female burials, further complicating our understanding of strict gender roles. "She would have wanted you to have them," Eric continues, "if your spirit truly called for them." He places the axe in your hand. It's heavier than you expected, the balance different from your practice stick, but it feels right, like an extension of your will. Tomorrow, Bjorn will begin to train you properly, not in secret, in the woods, but openly. If this is your choice, you will learn what it means to be a warrior. The relief and excitement are so overwhelming you can barely speak. You nod, your eyes shining. Your vow is made, not just to yourself in the quiet woods, but to your father, and through him, to the legacy of a grandmother you never knew, but whose spirit now feels incredibly close. The path ahead will be arduous, you know that. Your mother's reaction is still a hurdle to overcome, and the skepticism of your community will be a constant challenge. But tonight, holding this axe, feeling its cold, hard promise in your hand, you are no longer just a farm girl dreaming of adventure. You're a shield maiden in the making. The clang of steel you once heard from afar is now a call you are ready to answer. You might not get to charge into battle screaming for Asgard. Like in the movies, mostly because Asgard is for the gods, not your local postcode, but you'll find your own war cry. The conversation with your mother, Astrid, is as difficult as you anticipated. She weeps, she rails, she pleads. She paints vivid pictures of the horrors of battle, of wounds, of capture, of a lonely, childless future. She speaks of her dreams for you. A good marriage, a bustling household, grandchildren to bounce on her knee. Her words are like stones, bruising and heavy, and for a moment your resolve wavers. You see the genuine pain in her eyes, the fear that gnaws at her. This isn't just societal disapproval, this is a mother's love, terrified and uncomprehending. You try to explain, to make her understand the fire in your soul, but your words seem to fall flat against the wall of her anxieties. It feels like trying to describe the taste of salt to someone who has never seen the sea. Yet your father's quiet support acts as a bulwark. Eric doesn't argue with Astrid, but he stands by his decision to allow you to train. He reminds her gently that a Viking's path is not always one of safety, and that strength can take many forms. He tells her that your spirit is too wild to be caged, and to try would only break it. Slowly, reluctantly, Astrid begins to acquiesce, though her sighs become a permanent soundtrack to your days, and her looks are a constant mixture of worry and disapproval. It's not acceptance, not yet, but it's a grudging permission, and for now, that has to be enough. You make a silent promise to yourself that you will not just be strong, but also careful, for her sake as much as your own. And so, your formal training begins. Bjorn, your brother, takes on the role of your primary instructor. He's grown into a capable young warrior himself, strong and agile, having spent the last few summers on minor trading voyages that occasionally involved skirmishes. He is a stern taskmaster, far more demanding than he was during that brief playful encounter on the beach. There are no more gentle deflections. His practice blows, though delivered with blunted weapons, are hard enough to sting, to leave bruises that bloom in angry colours on your skin. He shows you no special favours because you are his sister, or because you are a girl. If anything, he seems determined to push you harder, to ensure you're truly prepared for the brutality you might one day face. Your days transform into a gruelling routine. Mornings are still filled with farm chores, your mother insists, but every afternoon you're on the beach, or in the clearings in the woods, practicing. You start with the absolute basics: stance, footwork, balance. Bjorn makes you hold your shield, your grandmother's shield, now yours, aloft for what feels like hours, until your arm screams in protest and your shoulder burns with a fiery ache. A shield is not just for blocking, he grunts, circling you. It is your companion, your wall. It must feel like part of you. If it's too heavy, you are too weak. So you hold it, sweat dripping into your eyes, until you think you will collapse. Then he makes you hold it longer. You learn the basic strikes with the axe, the overhead chop, the side swing, the quick, hooking blow. You practice against a pell, a sturdy wooden post set firmly in the ground, striking it again and again, focusing on precision, on power, on speed. Your hands blister, then callous. Your muscles ache with a constant dull throb. Some days you're so exhausted you can barely lift your spoon to your mouth at the evening meal. It's a far cry from the almost romantic notion of whirling into battle. This is repetitive, bone-jarring, and often incredibly frustrating work. You realise that heroic charges are probably 1% of battle, and the other 99% is just trying not to trip over a rock or your own feet. Bjorn teaches you how to parry with your axe, how to use the shield not just passively, but actively, to bash, to create an opening. He spars with you relentlessly. In the beginning, you're constantly on the defensive, overwhelmed by his speed and strength. His blunted sword or axe seems to tap you at will, on the arm, the leg, the ribs. Each touch would have been a wound, perhaps a fatal one, in a real battle. He doesn't mock your failures, but he doesn't coddle you either. Again is his constant refrain: faster, harder, think. Where is your opening? Where is mine? You learn about the different weapons of the Viking Age. The spear, often the primary weapon, versatile for both throwing and thrusting. The long-bladed seax, a sort of heavy single-edged knife that was part tool, part weapon. And of course, the sword, a high-status weapon, often beautifully crafted and immensely prized. Yours for now is the axe, a common and effective weapon, practical for both felling trees and felling foes. The Viking axe, particularly the bearded axe with its downward sweeping lower edge, was a fearsome tool capable of hooking shields or limbs. Historians note that the design of these axes allowed for a powerful shearing cut. Slowly, painfully, you begin to improve. Your movements become more fluid, your strikes more accurate. You start to anticipate Bjorn's attacks, to see the subtle shifts in his stance that telegraph his intentions. One day, you manage to block a series of his blows, and then in a swift instinctive move you hook his leg with your axe, a move he himself had shown you, and send him sprawling onto the sand. The surprise on his face is quickly replaced by a grudging grin. "Not bad, little sister," he says, dusting himself off. "Not bad at all." It's a small victory, but it tastes sweeter than any berry. Beyond the physical, Bjorn also tries to instill in you the mindset of a warrior. He speaks of courage, yes, but also of cunning, of discipline, of the importance of fighting not just with your body, but with your mind. He tells you stories of famous warriors, their triumphs and their mistakes. He teaches you to read the terrain, to use the environment to your advantage. He also impresses upon you the grim reality. In a real fight, there are no rules, only survival. A quirky and somewhat grim fringe tidbit about Viking warriors is the concept of the berserker gang, the state of frenzied rage some warriors were said to enter before battle. They would supposedly bite their shields, howl like animals, and fight with a reckless, terrifying fury, seemingly impervious to pain. Scholars still debate the reality and nature of berserkers. Were they fueled by ritual, hallucinogens, like certain mushrooms, or a form of battle-induced psychosis? Whatever the cause, it highlights the extreme psychological states sometimes associated with Viking warfare. Bjorn warns you against such uncontrolled fury, emphasizing that while ferocity is good, a clear head is better. You make a mental note not to try eating any suspicious-looking mushrooms before a sparring session. Your grandmother, Sigrid, watches your training with her knowing eyes. She doesn't comment often, but one evening as you are rubbing soothing ointment into a particularly nasty bruise on your arm, she sits beside you. "A warrior's path is lonely," she says quietly, "but it can also be a path of great honour. Remember the runes, child, not just for their magic, but for their wisdom." Tiwaz, she traces the arrow-shaped rune in the air, is the rune of the warrior, of justice, of sacrifice. Carry it in your heart. Your axe, once a heavy alien object, begins to feel like an extension of your arm. You practice with it until the movements are ingrained, instinctive. You learn its balance, the way the weight of the head can be used to your advantage. It's no longer just a tool, it's your partner in this new, challenging dance. The forging of a warrior is a painful, arduous process, stripping away your softness, your illusions, and replacing them with calluses, scars, and a core of unyielding steel. The girl who once dreamed of adventure by the fjord is slowly, surely being hammered into something new, something sharper, something ready. The seasons turn, and with them, your skills sharpen. 2 more summers have bled into autumns, then into the long, dark winters. You're 17 now, no longer a girl playing at war, but a young woman whose muscles are lean and hard beneath her tunic, whose hands are calloused, and whose eyes hold a new, steady watchfulness. Your training with Bjorn has been relentless, and you've supplemented it with your own fierce dedication, running the rocky coastline until your lungs burn, swimming in the icy fjord waters to build endurance, and practicing your axe work against the patient, scarred Pell until your movements are as natural as breathing. You're still not sure you could take down a fully enraged squirrel, but you're feeling more confident about 2-legged opponents. The day you've been both dreading and yearning for arrives with the spring tides. A longship, sleek and dark as a raven's wing, glides into your fjord. It's larger than any trading cog you've seen before, its high, arching prow carved into the menacing shape of a dragon's head, teeth bared in a silent snarl. Oars rise and fall in perfect synchrony, and the single square sail, striped in red and white, is expertly furled as it approaches the shore. This is no trading vessel, this is a warship, and it carries warriors. Their leader is a man named Halfdan, a renowned jarl from a powerful clan to the south. He knows your father, Eric, from days long past, and he has come seeking recruits for a voyage, a raid, he calls it, to the rich lands across the Western Sea, towards the coast of Angleland. Whispers of monasteries filled with gold and silver, of fertile lands poorly defended, have reached even your remote fjord. Halfdan is a charismatic figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face and eyes that seem to miss nothing. He speaks with a confident boom, his words painting pictures of glory and riches. Many of the young men in your settlement, including Bjorn, are eager to join. This is their chance to prove themselves, to win wealth and renown. And you? Your heart hammers against your ribs. This is it. The moment your training has been leading towards. You step forward, your grandmother's axe at your belt, your shield on your arm. A hush falls over the gathered crowd. Halfdan's gaze sweeps over you, a mixture of surprise and amusement flickering in his eyes. Some of his warriors snicker. "Well now, Eric," Halfdan says, a grin spreading across his face. "Your hospitality is generous, but I was seeking warriors, not shield warmers." Your face burns, but you stand your ground, meeting his gaze directly. "I am a warrior," you state, your voice clear and steady, though your insides are churning. "I have trained. I can fight." Eric steps forward, placing a hand on your shoulder. She speaks true, Halfdan. She has the heart of a Shieldmaiden and the skill to back it up. My own son has trained her. Bjorn nods his confirmation, albeit a little sheepishly under Halfdan's scrutiny. Halfdan strokes his beard, considering. The idea of women warriors isn't entirely unheard of, as you know, but it's certainly not commonplace. Historians still debate whether Shieldmaidens were accepted members of warbands, or if their presence was more a matter of individual circumstance and exceptional prowess. The sagas, like the saga of Hervor and Heidrek, feature prominent warrior women, but translating these literary accounts into concrete historical norms is tricky. Halfdan is a practical man. He needs skilled fighters, regardless of their gender, as long as they can pull their weight and not be a liability. "Very well," he says finally, a challenge in his voice. "Prove it. One of your own choosing. If you can hold your own against one of my men, you have a place on my ship. If not..." He shrugs, the implication clear. Your heart leaps. This is your chance. You scan the faces of Halfdan's warriors, looking for someone roughly your own size, not one of the hulking veterans who look like they could wrestle a bear and win. You choose a young, wiry warrior, not much older than yourself, who has a cocky smirk on his face. His name is Leif, and he clearly thinks this will be an easy victory, a bit of sport. You take your positions on the beach, the sand cool beneath your bare feet. The villagers and the warriors form a circle, their faces a mixture of curiosity, skepticism and anticipation. You can feel your mother's anxious gaze burning into your back. You take a deep breath, trying to calm the frantic beating of your heart. Remembering Bjorn's lessons, focus, balance, breathe. Remember your grandmother's rune, *Tiwaz* for courage. Leif attacks first, a series of quick probing strikes with his blunted practice sword. You parry, your shield meeting his blows with solid thuds. He's fast, faster than Bjorn, and he presses his advantage, trying to overwhelm you. You give ground, focusing on defense, feeling out his rhythm, his patterns. The crowd is silent, save for the clang of metal and wood, the rasp of your breath. He's testing you, trying to find a weakness. He probably thinks you'll tire quickly, or that your nerve will break. He clearly hasn't seen you outlast the family goat in a stubbornness contest. Then you see it. A slight overextension on a downward cut, a momentary imbalance. It's the kind of opening Bjorn drilled into you to recognise. You don't hesitate. You deflect his blade with your shield, the impact jarring your arm, and in the same motion, you step in close, bringing your axe up in a short, powerful arc. Not to strike him, but to hook the inside of his shield, pulling it sharply downwards and to the side. It's a move designed to unbalance and expose. Leif stumbles, surprised by the strength and speed of your manoeuvre. For a split second, his side is open. You could have landed a killing blow with your axe, but this is a test, not a true fight to the death. Instead, you spin, using the momentum, and bring the flat of your axe haft sharply against his exposed ribs. He grunts in pain and surprise, dropping to one knee. Silence. Then, a slow cheer starts from some of the onlookers. Bjorn is grinning proudly. Eric has a small, satisfied smile. Halfdan watches you, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he throws back his head and laughs, a booming sound that echoes across the fjord. By Odin's beard, the girl has spirit and skill. He claps Leif on the shoulder as the young warrior, looking rather chastened, gets to his feet. "You'll do, Shieldmaiden, you'll do. Welcome aboard." Relief washes over you, so potent it nearly buckles your knees. You did it. You earned your place. The snickers from Halfdan's men have died away, replaced by looks of grudging respect, or at least surprised curiosity. The next few days are a blur of preparations. You pack your few belongings, your axe and shield, a spare tunic, your sharpening stone, a small pouch of dried herbs from your mother, a reluctant peace offering, and the small wooden tile with the Tiwa's rune your grandmother pressed into your hand. Saying goodbye to your family is hard. Your mother cries openly now, clinging to you. But there's a new note in her voice. Not just fear, but a reluctant pride. Your father clasps your arm, his eyes conveying everything he cannot say. Sigrid simply nods, a fierce light in her old eyes. Then you're wading out to the longship, your heart a mix of excitement and trepidation. The ship, named Sea Serpent by its crew, is even more impressive up close. It's a Viking longship, a masterpiece of shipbuilding. Clinker-built with overlapping oak planks, shallow drafted for navigating rivers and landing on beaches, yet flexible enough to withstand the fury of the open ocean. A quirky tidbit. Viking longships often had a spirit planker, or stafnars, a specially chosen piece of wood in the stem or stern, believed to give the ship good luck and protect it from sea monsters and ill fortune. You wonder if the Sea Serpent has one, and if it's working overtime. You find a place at an oar bench. The ship is crowded with warriors, a rough, boisterous, bearded assembly, smelling of brine, sweat, and old leather. You are the only woman. You feel their eyes on you, curious, appraising, some still sceptical. But you earned your spot. You grip your oar, and as Halfdan gives the command, you join the others, pulling in rhythm, the great ship surging forward, leaving your familiar fjord behind. Your maiden voyage has begun. Ahead lies the unknown, the vast grey expanse of the sea, and beyond it your first taste of battle. The salt spray is already on your face, a baptism into your new life. The Sea Serpent slices through the waves, a living creature of wood and will, carrying its cargo of hopeful, anxious warriors towards the horizon. Life aboard the longship quickly settles into a rhythm dictated by the sea, the wind, and the needs of the vessel itself. It's a harsh, cramped, and often uncomfortable existence, a far cry from any romantic notions of sailing the high seas. There are no private cabins, no comfortable bunks. You sleep where you can find space, often at your oar bench, wrapped in your cloak, huddled against the man next to you for warmth, regardless of whether he snores like a walrus with a head cold, which many of them do. Your days are structured around rowing, sailing, and the endless maintenance a wooden ship demands. When the wind is favourable, the great square sail is hoisted, and the ship skims across the water with surprising speed. But often, especially when navigating close to coastlines or in contrary winds, it's the sheer muscle power of the crew at the oars that propels you forward. Rowing is back-breaking work. The heavy oars, often made of pine, demand strength and endurance. You pull in rhythm with the others, the creak and groan of the oars in their locks, the grunts of exertion, the rhythmic splash of the blades in the water becoming the soundtrack to your journey. Your hands, already calloused from axe work, develop new, deeper blisters that burst and bleed before hardening into leather. Your shoulders and back ache constantly. You learn the language of the ship, the names of the different ropes and parts of the rigging, the commands for hoisting and trimming the sail, the subtle shifts in the vessel's movement that signal a change in weather or sea state. You learn to bail water, a constant necessity as even the best-built ships take on some leakage, especially in rough seas. You learn to mend tears in the sail with a thick needle and coarse thread. Your fingers clumsy at first, but growing more adept. Everyone has a role. Everyone contributes. There's no room for passengers here. Survival depends on teamwork. Food is basic and monotonous. Dried fish, hard tack, type of dense, dry biscuit that could probably stop a stray arrow, salted meat, and occasionally, if you're lucky, some porridge made from oats or barley, cooked in a single large pot over a small fire-safe hearth box on deck. Fresh water is carefully rationed, stored in wooden casks, and it soon takes on a stale, woody taste. You quickly learn to appreciate the sharp tang of the soured milk or weak ale that sometimes supplements the water supply. You recall your mother's carefully prepared stews and freshly baked bread with a pang of longing. Compared to this, farm food feels like a king's feast. You wouldn't be surprised if the ship's cook used eau de bilge water as his secret ingredient. Despite the hardships, there's a rough camaraderie that develops among the crew. You're an anomaly, the sole woman in this company of men. But after your initial proving on the beach, and as you demonstrate your willingness to work as hard as anyone else, the open skepticism begins to fade, replaced by a grudging acceptance, and in some cases even a protective sort of respect. They see you hauling on ropes, pulling your weight at the oar, taking your turn at the messy, unpleasant jobs without complaint. You share stories, jokes, mostly terrible sailor-quality jokes, and the occasional smuggled piece of dried fruit. You learn their names, their home fjords, their reasons for being here. Some seek riches, some escape from trouble, some simply crave adventure. You find an unlikely ally in an older warrior named Ulf, a grizzled veteran with a network of scars that map his past battles. He's quiet, observant, and has a surprisingly gentle demeanour beneath his rough exterior. He sees your determination and offers occasional gruffly worded advice on everything, from how to pace yourself at the oar to the best way to keep your axe edge keen in the damp sea air. He even shows you a few sailor's knots that prove incredibly useful. He doesn't treat you like a curiosity, but simply as another member of the crew. His quiet acceptance helps to smooth your path with some of the more initially hostile warriors. The sea itself is a constant presence, a powerful, capricious entity. Some days it is calm, a vast, glittering plain under a blue sky, dolphins leaping in your bow wave. On these days, spirits are high. Men sing booming, off-key songs or try their luck fishing over the side. Other days the sea turns monstrous. Storms can blow up with terrifying speed, transforming the world into a maelstrom of wind and waves. The longship, designed for flexibility, twists and groans beneath. You monstrous green waves crashing over the bow, drenching everyone and everything. In these moments, fear is a cold knot in your stomach. But there's no time for terror. Everyone fights for the ship's survival, manning the steering oar, bailing furiously, securing loose gear, their faces grim and set against the screaming wind. You witness the raw power of nature, and it instills in you a profound respect for the forces that govern this world. Navigating the Whale Road, as the sea is poetically called in Old Norse, was a remarkable feat. Vikings were skilled navigators, using a combination of techniques. They observed the sun's position, the stars at night, the flight patterns of birds, the colour and temperature of the water, and even the presence of certain types of seaweed or fish. A fascinating, though somewhat debated historical fact is the possible use of sunstones, crystals like cordierite or calcite, which could polarize light and help locate the sun even on overcast days. Whether these were widely used or effective is a topic on which historians still argue, but it speaks to their ingenuity in trying to master the vastness of the ocean. You watch Halfdan and his most experienced steersman, noting how they constantly scan the sky and sea, their faces intent, reading signs invisible to your untrained eye. Nights at sea can be beautiful or terrifying. On clear nights, the stars are a brilliant, uncountable host, seeming so close you could almost reach out and touch them. The aurora, the Nordoljos, or northern lights, sometimes dances across the sky in curtains of green and purple, a breathtaking, mystical display that fills the crew with awe. These are moments of shared wonder, a reminder of the magic that still permeates your world. But on dark, moonless nights, or in thick fog, the sea feels alien and threatening, the ship a tiny, fragile speck in an endless, indifferent void. You learn to sleep lightly, to wake instantly at any change in the ship's motion, or any unusual sound. During lulls in the work, or when the weather is too foul for much else, the men maintain their weapons. The scrape of whetstone on steel becomes a familiar sound. You too spend time caring for your grandmother's axe, ensuring its edge is razor sharp, the haft oiled and smooth. It's a meditative ritual connecting you to the purpose of this journey. You also practice your stances and strikes in the limited space available, trying to keep your muscles toned and your reflexes sharp. Some of the men offer tips, sharing their own preferred techniques. You listen, you learn, you adapt. This longship life is a crucible, forging you in ways different from Bjorn's training, but no less vital. It's teaching you resilience, teamwork, and the quiet strength found in enduring shared hardship. And most importantly, how to sleep sitting up while someone uses your shoulder as a pillow and sings sea shanties about particularly aggressive cod. After what feels like an eternity of grey waves and the monotonous rhythm of oar and sail, a smudge appears on the horizon. Land. A low, green coastline, unfamiliar and inviting, yet tinged with the apprehension of what's to come. This is the coast of Angleland, the target of your raid. Excitement ripples through the sea serpent's crew, a nervous energy replacing the weary boredom of the long voyage. Weapons are checked and rechecked, shield straps tightened, hushed conversations filled with speculation and bravado. You feel it too, a knot of anticipation tightening in your stomach, a mixture of fear and a fierce, almost predatory eagerness. This is what you trained for. This is the first true test. Halfdan gathers the core warriors, including you and Bjorn, around the carved dragon prow as the ship slips quietly along the coast under the cover of a pre-dawn mist. He points to a small inlet, a river mouth half hidden by reeds. "There," he says, his voice a low rumble. "A settlement lies a short way upriver. A monastery, the scouts from a previous voyage reported. Rich in silver, poorly defended. We go in fast, secure the wealth, and are back on the ship before any significant armed response can be mustered." His plan is simple, brutal, and classic Viking strategy: surprise, speed, and overwhelming force against a soft target. The longship is manoeuvred silently into the river mouth, its shallow draft allowing it to navigate where larger vessels could not. The air is cool and damp, smelling of mud and vegetation, so different from the clean salt tang of the open sea. The only sounds are the gentle dip of the steering oar and the muffled calls of unseen birds. You grip your axe, its familiar weight a comfort in your hand. Your shield feels like a natural extension of your arm, just as Bjorn had insisted it should. The landing is swift and silent. Warriors leap over the side into the shallows, shields raised, axes and swords drawn. You're among the first, the cold river water shocking your legs as you splash towards the muddy bank. There's no grand battle cry yet, just a focused intensity, a deadly purpose. The mist still clings to the ground, muffling sounds and reducing visibility, which works both for and against you. It's like moving through a dream, albeit one where everyone is heavily armed and probably hasn't brushed their teeth in weeks. The monastery comes into view sooner than you expect, a collection of simple stone and wattle and daub buildings, surrounded by a low, poorly maintained wooden palisade. A few startled monks, their faces pale with terror, are the first to see you. Their cries of alarm are cut short as Halfdan's warriors surge forward. There's no time for negotiation, no room for mercy in their eyes. This is business. Chaos erupts. The air fills with shouts, screams, the clang of steel on the few pathetic weapons the monks try to wield, the thud of axes against wooden doors. It's a whirlwind of confusing, brutal action. You stick close to Bjorn and Ulf, the grizzled veteran trying to stay aware of your surroundings, your senses heightened to an almost painful degree. Your heart hammers against your shield. A monk, surprisingly large and brandishing a heavy wooden cross like a club, rushes towards you, his face contorted in fear and fury. Instinct takes over. You raise your shield, deflecting the clumsy blow, the impact jarring up your arm. You don't have time to think, only to react as Bjorn trained you. You sidestep, using his momentum against him, and bring your axe around in a short, sharp blow to his exposed side. It's not a killing strike. You instinctively pull it slightly, but it's enough to send him sprawling to the ground, gasping. You don't pause to see more. The fight is flowing around you. This is not the heroic, clean combat of the sagas. It's messy, terrifying, and deeply unsettling. You see men fall, hear cries of pain. The smell of blood, sharp and coppery, mixes with the scent of fear and the damp earth. You deflect another blow, this time from a desperate villager who has rushed from a nearby hut, armed with a pitchfork. Your shield holds. You push him back, shouting a warning, but he comes again, his eyes wide with panic. This time Bjorn is there, his own axe a blur, and the man crumples. Bjorn gives you a quick grim nod. No time for reflection. The main resistance, such as it is, crumbles quickly. The monks and few local men are no match for disciplined warriors. The focus shifts to looting. Doors are kicked in, chests smashed open. Gold chalices, silver plates, embroidered vestments, anything of value is seized. You find yourself standing guard with a few others at the entrance to the main chapel, while the looting happens within. The sounds from inside, the splintering of wood, the triumphant shouts, are disturbing. This is the reality of a raid. It's not just about battle, it's about plunder. It's about the brutal acquisition of wealth. A historical fact, monasteries, like the famous one at Lindisfarne raided in 793 AD, an event often considered the start of the Viking Age, were frequent targets precisely because they were centres of wealth and learning, often poorly defended, making them irresistible to raiders. The monks were literate and recorded these attacks, which is one reason why Vikings gained such a fearsome reputation in Christian chronicles. Suddenly, a group of late-arriving local Fjordmen, local militia, hastily armed with spears and agricultural tools, burst from the trees at the edge of the clearing, attempting a counterattack. They are not professional soldiers, but they are desperate and angry. Halfdan roars a command and a shield wall quickly forms. "Wall up! Hold the line!" This is your first experience of a true shield wall. You find your place shoulder to shoulder with Bjorn on one side and Ulf on the other, your shield interlocked with theirs, presenting a solid barrier of wood and steel. The Fjordmen charge, shouting their defiance. Spears rain down, thudding against the shields. You brace yourself, planting your feet firmly, your shield held high to protect your head and torso. The pressure is immense. You can hear the grunts and shouts of your comrades, the clash of weapons. It's a terrifying, exhilarating experience. You're no longer an individual, but part of a larger living entity. Your small section of the wall becomes your entire world. You trust the man to your left, the man to your right. Your life depends on them, and theirs on you. A spear point slides past the edge of your shield, tearing through your tunic sleeve and scoring a burning line across your arm. Pain, sharp and sudden, but adrenaline numbs it almost immediately. You jab forward with your axe through a small gap, forcing a spearman back. Ulf, beside you, grunts as he takes a blow to his shield that nearly buckles his knees, but he holds. The Fjordmen, lacking the discipline and heavy armour of Halfdan's warriors, begin to falter against the unyielding wall. Historians still argue about the exact tactics and formations of the shield wall, how flexible it was, how it advanced, how openings were exploited, but its psychological and defensive power is undeniable. The counterattack breaks, the Fjordmen scatter, leaving several of their number fallen on the blood-soaked ground. Halfdan gives the order to withdraw, laden with spoils. The retreat to the Sea Serpent is swift, organised. You move with your comrades, your arm throbbing, your senses still reeling from the intensity of the fight. Back on board, as the ship is pushed out into the river current, the adrenaline begins to fade, replaced by a profound exhaustion and a troubling mix of emotions. You have faced battle, you have shed blood, you have stood in the shield wall, you survived. Your first raid. The taste of it is bitter, coppery, and undeniably real. A quirky tidbit. Some scholars suggest that the psychological impact of the shield wall, the rhythmic chanting or shield banging that sometimes accompanied it, was a deliberate tactic to intimidate enemies and bolster the warrior's own courage, a kind of ancient psychological warfare. You can attest to the fact that being on the receiving end of a charging line while trying to remember which end of the axe is the pointy one is definitely intimidating. The journey back from the raid on the Angleland monastery is different from the voyage out. The initial elation of victory and survival, the frenzied energy of battle, slowly gives way to a more sombre mood. The ship is heavier now, laden with plundered goods, silver crosses, jewelled book covers, sacks of coins, fine fabrics. But it also carries the weight of what was done. You tend to the shallow cut on your arm, cleaning it with precious fresh water and a bit of the moss your mother had tucked into your bag, which she claimed had drawing properties. It stings, but it's a minor wound, a badge of your first real fight. Others were not so lucky. Several warriors nurse more serious injuries, their groans a constant reminder of the battle's toll. 2 men did not return at all, their places at the oars starkly empty. The camaraderie on board shifts. There's less boisterous joking, more quiet contemplation. You see men staring out at the waves, their faces unreadable. You too grapple with the images seared into your mind, the terror in the monk's eyes, the brutal efficiency of the raid, the desperate courage of the Fjordmen. It wasn't the glorious, clean heroism of the sagas. It was savage, bloody, and morally grey. You recall the sagas often glossing over the, shall we say, less photogenic aspects of raiding. They tend to focus on the brave hero and his mighty deeds, not so much on the terrified villagers running for their lives. You find yourself sitting near Ulf, the older warrior, as he carefully sharpens his axe, his movements slow and deliberate. He catches you watching him. "The first one is always hard," he says, his voice low, not looking up from his work. "It changes you. Some men grow drunk on it. Others learn from it. He pauses, then adds, "You stood well in the wall, girl. Kept your head. That's more than can be said for some." His words are a small comfort. You hadn't frozen, you had fought, you had survived. But the question lingers, at what cost? The silver and gold in the hold feel tainted. You think of your grandmother Sigrid and her teachings about the runes. Fehu, wealth. Yes, but what kind of wealth? And what of Tiwa's justice? Where was the justice for the monks, for the villagers whose homes were plundered? These are questions without easy answers, and they churn within you as the sea serpent sails on. Winter is approaching as you finally make landfall back in your own region, though not at your home fjord. Halfdan directs the ship to a larger, more established trading port, a bustling settlement where the spoils of the raid can be divided and traded. Here, amidst the throng of merchants, craftsmen and warriors from various lands, the grimness of the raid recedes somewhat, replaced by the excitement of newfound wealth. The division of the plunder is a formal affair. Halfdan, as Jarl and leader, takes the largest share. His key warriors, those who distinguished themselves, also receive significant portions. You, Bjorn, and the other regular crew members get your allotted share. A satisfying pile of silver coins, a few trinkets, a bolt of fine embroidered cloth. It's more wealth than you've ever possessed. The silver feels heavy in your hand. You could return to your farm, buy land, livestock. You could live comfortably. But the thought feels strangely hollow. The call of the shield and the axe, though now tempered with the harsh reality of battle, has not entirely faded. With the raiding season over due to the advancing winter, Halfdan announces his intention to winter in this port town, or perhaps travel to a friendly Jarl's hall further inland, where his warriors can find lodging and sustenance until spring. Many longship crews did this. Finding a suitable place to spend the harsh Scandinavian winter was crucial. It was a time for repairing ships and gear, for feasting and storytelling, and for planning the next season's ventures. A historical fact: Viking warriors, when not raiding or trading, often attach themselves to a chieftain or king, becoming part of his herd or household guard, offering their loyalty and fighting skills in exchange for food, lodging, and a share of any spoils or gifts. You and Bjorn discuss your options. He's keen to stay with Halfdan, his taste of battle having whetted his appetite for more. He's already swaggering a bit, his share of the silver jingling in a pouch at his belt. You, however, feel a restlessness, a desire for something different. The life of a raider, while it has brought you the adventure you craved, also leaves a bitter aftertaste. You remember your father, Eric, who eventually turned from raiding to farming. Perhaps there were other paths for a warrior. You spend your days in the port town observing, listening. It's a melting pot of cultures. You see traders from Francia, from the Saxon lands, even a dark-skinned merchant from the distant south, his stall filled with exotic spices and silks. You hear different languages, see different customs. The world feels vast, much larger than your small fjord, or even the confines of Halfdan's warband. One evening, in a crowded, smoky mead hall, you overhear a group of traders speaking of voyages not just for plunder, but for peaceful commerce, sailing east along the great rivers into the lands of the Rus, or south to the rich markets of the Mediterranean. They speak of establishing trading posts, of bartering furs and amber for silver and silks. It's a different kind of adventure, one that involves negotiation and cunning rather than brute force. Historians still argue about the primary motivation for Viking expansion. Was it land hunger, the pursuit of plunder, the desire for trade, or a complex combination of all these factors? The evidence suggests that Vikings were incredibly adaptable, capable of being raiders, traders, explorers, and settlers, often simultaneously or at different stages of their careers. A quirky tidbit from this period is the sheer variety of goods found in Viking hordes and trading sites. Amber from the Baltic, walrus ivory from Greenland, silks from Byzantium and even China, via complex trade routes, glassware from the Rhineland, and Arab silver dirhams from the Middle East. It shows a far-reaching network of connections. You imagine these routes, these distant lands, and a new kind of excitement begins to stir, different from the battle fever, but no less compelling. Perhaps your axe and shield could be used not just to take, but also to protect, to carve out a different kind of future. You also notice the women in this port town. Many are wives and daughters of merchants and craftsmen, their lives bound to the domestic sphere. But you also see women running stalls in the market, haggling fiercely over prices. You see women who are clearly in charge of their own households, their own businesses. It reinforces your belief that a woman's role doesn't have to be narrowly defined. As the first snows of winter begin to fall, dusting the thatched roofs of the port town, you make a decision. You will not spend the winter feasting and boasting with Halfdan's crew, waiting for the spring raiding season. You will seek a different path. You thank Bjorn for his training and his comradeship, wishing him well. He is disappointed, but he understands, or at least accepts, your need to follow your own way. You take your share of the silver, your axe and your shield, and you begin to inquire about joining a trading caravan heading east when the weather allows. The taste of your first raid was a harsh lesson, but it also opened your eyes to a wider world of possibilities. The shield wall taught you about collective strength, but now you're ready to stand on your own, at least for a while, and discover what other rhythms life on the Whale Road, or perhaps the River Road, might offer. The salt from the Angleland coast is still on your cloak, but a new wind is calling. The decision to part ways with Bjorn and Halfdan's crew isn't easy. There's a certain security in belonging to a warband, a known structure, however rough. But the thought of another season of raiding, of more monasteries plundered and villages terrorized, sits uneasily in your gut. The silver you earned feels less like a trophy and more like a weight. You seek out the merchants you overheard in the mead hall, a group planning an overland and river journey eastward, towards the lands of the Russ, with the eventual aim of reaching the great trading emporiums, along the Dnieper River, or perhaps even further, to Miklagard, the Viking name for Constantinople, the glittering capital of the Byzantine Empire. Their leader is a seasoned trader named Runic, a man whose face is a map of windburn and shrewd calculation. He's more interested in profit margins than battle glory, though he's no stranger to defending his goods. He eyes you skeptically when you approach, your axe and shield marking you as a warrior, not a typical merchant. "We need guards, it's true," he says, stroking his braided beard, which is surprisingly well kept for a man who spends so much time on the road. "The rivers are full of perils, not all of them natural. But a woman, and one so young?" You meet his gaze steadily, much as you did with Halfdan. "I can handle an axe, and I'm not afraid of hardship. I can pull my weight, and I'll take a smaller share for the chance to learn the routes." You offer him a small portion of your silver as a sign of good faith to cover your initial keep. Money talks, even to skeptical traders. Runic, after a moment's thought and a quick appraising glance at the quality of your axe, your grandmother's axe still sharp and well balanced, grunts his assent. "We leave when the rivers are passable after the thaw. Be ready." And so, as spring finally breathes life back into the frozen land, you find yourself part of a different kind of company. Instead of a sleek longship, your primary mode of transport becomes sturdy, shallow-drafted riverboats, sometimes rowed, sometimes sailed if the wind is right, and often laboriously hauled or portaged overland between river systems. The cargo is not plunder, but goods for trade. Furs, sable, marten, beaver, highly prized in the south, along with amber, honey, wax and walrus ivory. These are the riches of the north, to be exchanged for the silver, silks, spices, and fine crafts of the Byzantine and Arab worlds. Life on the River Road is as demanding as life on the Whale Road, but in different ways. The rowing is still hard, but now there's also the grueling work of dragging boats over log rollers at portages, or navigating treacherous rapids where one wrong move could mean losing cargo, boat, and life. You learn to read the river's currents, to spot submerged rocks and sandbars. You learn the art of making camp in all weathers, of foraging for food to supplement the supplies, of keeping a watchful eye for bandits or hostile tribes who might view a trading party as an easy target. It's less as shield wall, and more. Okay, who forgot to tie down the beaver pelts before we hit those rapids? Your companions are a motley crew, Scandinavian traders like Runic, a few local Finnic trappers acting as guides in the northern forests, some hardy slaves who know the river systems intimately. There's less of the boisterous warrior bravado, and more of a cautious, watchful professionalism. They are tough, pragmatic, and their conversations revolve around prices, routes, and the trustworthiness of various trading partners. You are still an oddity, the young woman with the warrior's gear, but as you prove your strength in hauling boats and your vigilance on watch, you earn a grudging respect. Your axe is still at your side, your shield still, ready. But now they are tools of protection for the group and its valuable cargo. Rather than instruments of aggression, you travel through vast, dark forests, across wide, windswept plains, and down endless, winding rivers. You see settlements vastly different from your own fjordside home. Small Slavic villages, fortified Finno-Ugric hill forts, the beginnings of what will become larger ruse trading towns. You encounter people with different customs, different gods, different ways of life. You learn a smattering of new words in various tongues, enough to barter for food or understand a warning. The world is opening up to you in a way that raiding never could. A historical fact: the Viking trade routes to the east, often called the Volga trade route, and the Dnieper trade route, were extensive and vital. They connected Scandinavia not just with the Byzantine Empire, but also, through Arab intermediaries, with Central Asia and even further east. Huge quantities of Arab silver dirhams, found in Scandinavian hoards, testify to the scale of this trade. These routes were not just for goods. They were conduits for cultural exchange, ideas, and people. You witness the complexities of trade. Runic is a master negotiator, haggling for hours over a few percentage points, using charm, bluster, and an encyclopedic knowledge of current market values. You see alliances formed and broken, rivalries flare up between different trading groups. You learn that wealth can be won not just with a sharp axe, but with a sharp mind and a persuasive tongue. Sometimes, the most dangerous weapon in Runic's arsenal is his ability to look deeply disappointed when offered a low price for his furs. There are dangers, of course. One evening, as you are camped by a riverbank, a band of Pecheneg nomads, skilled horsemen from the steppes, attempt a night raid. This time, your warrior skills are truly tested. The fight is swift, brutal, and fought in the flickering, confusing light of the campfire. You stand with the other guards, your axe and shield a familiar comfort. You take a glancing blow to your shield that makes your arm ring, but you hold your ground, felling one attacker who tries to break through your position. The raid is repulsed, but not without losses on both sides. It's a stark reminder that even on a trading voyage, violence is never far away. A quirky or fringe tidbit about these eastern voyages is the account of Ahmad ibn Fadlan, a 10th century Arab traveller who encountered Vikings, whom he called Russia, on the Volga. His detailed and often horrified descriptions of their hygiene, or lack thereof in his opinion, despite the Viking combs we know about, their funeral customs, including elaborate ship burials with sacrifices, and their general demeanour provide a rare, non-Scandinavian eyewitness perspective. Historians still argue about the accuracy and potential biases in Ibn Fadlan's account, but it remains a fascinating glimpse into how Vikings were perceived by an outsider from a very different culture. You wonder if he'd have been less horrified if he'd seen them after a bath, not before. As you travel further south and east, the landscape changes. The goods traded become more exotic. You see caravans arriving with silks from even further east, spices that fill the air with strange, intoxicating aromas, intricate metalwork and fine pottery. You see the power of silver to transcend language and culture, a universal language of commerce. Your own small hoard of silver, earned from that first raid, seems insignificant compared to the wealth that flows through these arteries of trade. You're no longer just a Shieldmaiden. You're becoming a traveller, an observer, a small cog in the vast machinery of a global, for its time, network. You're learning that the world is a tapestry woven from many threads, not just the thread of war. The call of your axe is still there, but it's now joined by the call of the unknown horizon, the lure of new markets, new peoples, new understandings. Your journey along the silver and silk roads, though only just beginning, is already reshaping your perspective, showing you that a warrior's strength can be applied in more ways than one, and that sometimes the greatest treasures are not those you take by force, but those you earn through exchange and discovery. The journey with Runic's trading caravan continues, a slow, winding path deeper into the lands of the east. Months blur into a cycle of river travel, overland portages, and bustling, chaotic marketplaces in newly established Rus settlements. You've seen things that would have been unimaginable back on your quiet fjord, vast, unending forests giving way to sweeping grasslands, nomadic horsemen with faces weathered like old leather, and merchants from so many different lands that the marketplace sounds like a parliament of birds, each squawking in its own tongue. Your smattering of new words grows, and you find a surprising knack for understanding gestures and intent, even when language fails. One late autumn, as the caravan is navigating a treacherous stretch of rapids on a tributary of the Dnieper, disaster strikes. Your boat, heavily laden with prime summer furs destined for the markets of Miklagard, hits a submerged log with a sickening crunch. The impact throws several crew members, including you, into the churning icy water. The cold is a brutal shock, stealing your breath. You fight your way to the surface, gasping just in time to see the boat capsize, spilling its precious cargo and its struggling crew into the rapids. Panic ensues. Men are shouting, flailing, bales of fur are bobbing away downstream. You grab onto a piece of the wreckage, your limbs already starting to numb from the cold. You see Runic, his face a mask of fury and despair, clinging to an overturned section of the hull. Then you see one of the younger crew members, a boy named Oleg, who had always been kind to you, struggling against the current, his eyes wide with terror as he's pulled under. Without a second thought, you push away from your piece of wreckage and lunge towards him. The current is powerful, tugging at you, trying to drag you under. Your waterlogged woolen clothes feel like lead weights. But you reach him, grab a handful of his tunic and fight with all your strength to keep his head above water, battling towards the shallows near the riverbank. Every muscle screams in protest, your lungs burn, and the icy water saps your strength relentlessly. You make it somehow, dragging Oleg half-conscious onto the muddy bank. You collapse beside him, shivering uncontrollably, every inch of your body aching. Other survivors are straggling ashore, soaked and miserable. The boat is a wreck, much of the cargo lost. Runic is devastated, not just by the financial loss, but by the injury to his pride as a canny trader. He's usually so careful. It's a harsh lesson that even the most experienced can be caught out by the river's treachery. You realise that sometimes, even with all the planning, the river just decides it wants your beaver pelts more than you do. In the chaotic aftermath, as you're trying to help salvage what little can be recovered, a loose swinging boom from the damaged boat dislodged by the current catches you unawares. It strikes your left leg with brutal force. You hear a sickening crack, and then an explosion of white-hot pain that makes you cry out and crumple to the ground. The next few weeks are a blur of agony and fever. Your leg is broken, a bad compound fracture. In this era, without modern medicine, such an injury is often a death sentence, or at least a crippling disability. There are no sterile operating rooms, no antibiotics, no skilled surgeons. The best they can do is try to set the bone as straight as possible, bind it tightly with wooden splints and linen strips, and hope for the best. Runic, despite his initial despair over the lost cargo, shows a surprising degree of concern. Perhaps he feels responsible, or perhaps he recognises the value of someone who risked her life for another. He assigns an older woman from a nearby Slavic village, reputed to have some skill with herbs and healing, to look after you. She's a stern, quiet woman named Zoraya. Her face a network of wrinkles, her hands surprisingly gentle. She cleans your wound with boiled water and applies poultices of comfrey and other herbs, muttering incantations you don't understand. The pain is immense, a constant throbbing fire. Fever racks your body and you drift in and out of consciousness, plagued by vivid, disturbing dreams. You dream of the monastery raid, of the faces of the monks. You dream of your family back on the fjord, of your mother's worried face. You dream of drowning in icy water. This period of forced immobility is a new kind of torment. You, who have always been active, who have defined yourself by your strength and skill with an axe, are now helpless, dependent on the kindness of others. The trading caravan has to move on before the worst of winter sets in, leaving you in Zoraya's care in her small smoky hut in the Slavic village. Runic leaves you a share of the salvaged goods, enough to pay for your keep, and promises to check on you if he passes this way again in the spring. It's a lonely, frightening time. As the initial agony subsides and the fever breaks, you are left with the long, slow process of healing. Your leg, tightly bound, aches constantly. You spend your days lying on a straw pallet, watching the patterns of smoke curl towards the hole in the roof of Zoraya's hut. Boredom is a heavy blanket, but this enforced stillness also brings a strange kind of clarity. With nothing else to do, you reflect. You think about your journey so far, the fierce joy of your warrior training, the brutal reality of the raid, the hardships and wonders of the river road. You consider the choices you've made. You remember your grandmother Sigrid and her wisdom. You recall the runes she taught you. You think of urus, strength, and how it's not just about physical power, but also about resilience, the ability to endure. You think of Perthro, the rune of fate, of mystery, of something hidden that is revealed. Perhaps this injury, this setback, has a purpose you cannot yet see. A historical fact. Healing in the Viking Age was a mixture of practical knowledge, like setting bones and stitching wounds, and folk magic or religious appeals. Herbal remedies were widely used, and some, like willow bark, containing salicylic acid, a precursor to aspirin for pain relief, had genuine medicinal properties. However, infection was a constant danger, and survival from serious wounds was often a matter of luck and constitution. Zoria, though a woman of few words, shares some of her knowledge of forest lore with you. She teaches you to identify different herbs, their uses for healing or for sustenance. She tells you old Slavic folk tales, stories of forest spirits and river gods. It's a different kind of wisdom from the Norse sagas, but it speaks to the same deep connection with the natural world, the same understanding of the hidden forces that shape human lives. You learn that even in this small, remote village, life is rich with its own traditions and beliefs. A quirky tidbit from the broader region. In many early Slavic cultures, there was a strong belief in household spirits, like the domovoi, who protected the home and family if properly appeased, often with offerings of food, but could cause mischief if angered. Zoria occasionally leaves a small portion of bread or milk in a corner of the hut, a quiet acknowledgement of these unseen presences. It reminds you a little of the offering sometimes made to land spirits or alpha back home. As your leg slowly, painfully mends, you begin to regain some mobility, first with a crude crutch, then with a sturdy staff. The injury will leave you with a permanent limp, a constant reminder of the river's treachery. Your days as a frontline shield wall warrior are likely over. You won't have the same speed or agility. This is a bitter pill to swallow, but as one door closes, another might be opening. Your forced convalescence has given you time to think, to observe, to learn. You've gained a deeper understanding of the fragility of life and the resilience of the human spirit. The wound is a loss, but the wisdom gleaned from this period of suffering is a gain, albeit one hard one. The shine of silver and the thrill of battle seem less important now than the quiet strength you found within yourself, the ability to endure and adapt. Your journey is far from over. It's just taking an unexpected turn. Spring arrives, painting the recovering landscape in shades of fresh green, and tentatively chasing away the last of the winter chill. Your leg, though still stiff and prone to aching, especially in the damp mornings, has mended well enough for you to walk with the aid of a sturdy staff. The limp is pronounced, a permanent alteration to your gait, a physical testament to your ordeal. But Zoria's care, her herbal remedies, and your own stubborn constitution have seen you through the worst. You've spent the long winter months not just healing physically, but also observing the rhythms of life in the small Slavic village, learning more about their customs, their language, and their deep connection to the forest and river. You've even picked up a few basic healing skills from Zoria, discovering a patience and an eye for detail you didn't know you possessed. Perhaps all those hours spent meticulously sharpening your axe weren't so different from carefully grinding herbs for a poultice. With the arrival of warmer weather, the river thaws completely, and trade begins to stir again. True to his word, Rurik's caravan passes through the area on its return journey from the south, their boats now laden with Byzantine silks, glassware, and silver coins earned from the sale of other northern goods. Rurik is surprised, and genuinely pleased to find you not only alive but relatively mobile. He had, he admits, half expected never to see you again. He listens to your account of the winter, noting your newfound knowledge of local herbs and your improved grasp of the local dialect. The loss of his cargo in the rapids still stings him, but he also remembers your bravery in saving young Oleg. He sees the permanent limp, the end of your potential as a full-fledged warrior guard in the traditional sense. Yet, he also sees something new in your eyes, a quiet resilience, a thoughtful maturity that wasn't there before. You have a good head on your shoulders, girl, he says, stroking his beard, and you've learned much. A pity about the leg for fighting. But perhaps there are other ways to be valuable. He makes you an offer. not as a guard this time, but as a sort of assistant, a go-between. Your knowledge of the local language and customs, your understanding of some basic healing, these are useful skills. And, he adds with a wry grin, your reputation for courage, even if now tempered by injury, still carries weight. People remember the Shieldmaiden who pulled Oleg from the rapids. Your story has, in a small way, begun to travel along the river routes, embellished with each telling. You're no longer just an anonymous face in the caravan. You are the Shieldmaiden of the Rapids, or Axe Hild with the Limp, or some other equally dramatic if slightly inaccurate moniker. It's a bit like getting a cool superhero name, only with more mud and fewer capes. You accept Rurik's offer. The thought of returning to your old life, of trying to be the warrior you once were, feels wrong. That chapter is closed, but this new role, using your mind and your experiences in a different way, feels like a path forward. You rejoin the caravan, your staff now as familiar to your hand as your axe once was, though you still carry the axe, a reminder of who you are and where you've been. Your role evolves. You help with translating in smaller villages, smoothing over misunderstandings. You tend to minor injuries and illnesses among the crew, your knowledge of Zoria's herbal remedies proving surprisingly effective. You learn to keep accounts, to assess the quality of goods, to anticipate the needs of the caravan. Rurik, initially cautious, begins to trust your judgment, often asking for your opinion on potential trading partners or new routes. Your limp means you can't move as quickly, but it also means you spend more time observing, listening, and people, for some reason, seem more inclined to talk to a woman who leans on a staff than to a fully armed warrior. Your reputation, built on that single act of bravery and your subsequent survival and adaptation, begins to precede you. In the small trading posts and settlements along the rivers, people know of you. They see your axe, still carried with an air of quiet competence, and they see your limp, a mark of hardship overcome. It's a strange kind of fame. You're not celebrated for slaughtering enemies, but for resilience and a certain kind of quiet authority. Historians still argue about how individual reputations were built and maintained in such a mobile, often illiterate society. Word of mouth, storytelling, and demonstrable skill or character likely played huge roles, with memorable deeds or attributes becoming defining features. One summer, Rurik decides to send a smaller exploratory party up a less-travelled tributary, seeking new sources of furs and amber. He chooses you to lead it. It's a significant responsibility. You're in charge of a small boat, a handful of experienced traders and boatmen, and a valuable consignment of goods for trade. The old thrill of adventure, of the unknown, flickers within you, but it's different now. It's not the hot fire of battle lust, but the cooler, steadier flame of purpose. The journey is challenging. The river is wild, the local tribes initially suspicious. There are moments of danger, when you have to negotiate passage through contested territory, or when a sudden storm threatens your small boat. But you handle each crisis with a calm competence that surprises even yourself. Your warrior training serves you well, not in fighting, but in discipline, in strategic thinking, in the ability to remain calm under pressure. Your knowledge of healing keeps your small crew healthy. Your growing diplomatic skills learned at Rurik's side help you establish peaceful, profitable trade with a remote tribe previously hostile to outsiders. You return to Rurik's main camp months later, your boat laden with prime furs and amber, having opened up a new valuable trading connection. Rurik is immensely pleased. Your success solidifies your position, not just as a useful assistant, but as a capable leader in your own right. The men who were initially sceptical of a woman, and a lame one at that, leading an expedition now look at you with a new respect. You have proven that leadership comes in many forms, and that a sharp mind and a determined spirit can be as effective as a strong sword arm. A quirky tidbit related to leadership and reputation. Viking chieftains and leaders often relied heavily on charisma and a proven track record of success, whether in raiding, trading, or providing for their followers. Generosity was also a key leadership trait. A good leader was expected to share wealth with their retinue, binding them through loyalty and mutual benefit. Your ability to bring back profit for Rurik and the caravan contributes directly to this model. The weight of leadership is new and sometimes heavy. You're responsible for the safety and success of those under your command. Their trust in you is a precious, sometimes daunting thing, but you find you are suited to it. The girl who once dreamed of glory in the shield wall is now finding a different kind of renown. one built on resilience, wisdom, and the ability to forge connections rather than just break enemies. Your deeds, though perhaps not as bloody as those of Halfdan's warriors, are beginning to be sung in their own way, whispered tales along the river routes of the Shieldmaiden who walks with a limp but leads with a clear head and a steady hand. Your journey continues, and with each passing season, your reputation as a shrewd and capable figure grows, not just despite your wound, but perhaps in some small way because of it. Years pass, measured in the rhythm of the trading seasons, the spring thaw opening the rivers, the flurry of summer travel and commerce, the preparations for the harsh eastern winter. You're no longer the tentative young woman learning the ropes from Runic. You're now a seasoned trader in your own right, perhaps in your late 20s or early 30s. Your limp is a familiar part of you, your staff a constant companion. Your grandmother's axe is still with you, a symbol of your past and a tool of last resort. But your true weapons now are your knowledge of trade routes, your understanding of diverse cultures, your fluency in several dialects, and the network of contacts and alliances you've carefully built. Runic, growing older, has gradually entrusted you with more and more responsibility. You now manage significant portions of his trading enterprise, leading larger expeditions, negotiating high-value deals, and even representing his interest in disputes with other trading groups. Your reputation for fairness, shrewdness, and resilience has spread far along the eastern river roads. People know that your word is good, and that while you're tough in negotiation, you are also reliable. You've learned that sometimes the most effective way to win a battle in trade is to ensure everyone feels like they've gained something. A far cry from the zero-sum game of a raid. You've even managed to make a profit on a shipment of slightly singed beaver pelts by marketing them as fire-kissed, a testament to your developing salesmanship. The path of a warrior, which once seemed your sole destiny, now feels like a distant chapter. You still remember the clang of steel, the terror and exhilaration of the shield wall, but those memories no longer define you. Instead, your days are filled with the complexities of logistics, the subtle dance of diplomacy, the thrill of discovery when a new route proves profitable or a new alliance is forged. You've seen firsthand how trade can connect disparate peoples, fostering a degree of understanding, or at least tolerance, where only suspicion existed before. Of course, it also fosters intense rivalry and occasional outright conflict, but you've become adept at navigating these treacherous waters. You've wintered in bustling trade emporia like Birka in Sweden, or Hedeby in Denmark during visits back west, and in the sprawling, chaotic, and incredibly diverse settlements growing along the Dnieper, places that are precursors to the great cities of the Kievan Rus. You've seen goods from the far corners of the known world, fine Chinese silks, fragrant spices from India, gleaming Byzantine goldwork, intricate Arab silver. You've met people of countless faiths and cultures. This constant exposure to the wider world has broadened your horizons immeasurably. A historical fact: Viking Age trade was not just about luxury goods. Bulk commodities like timber, slaves, grain and textiles were also hugely important. The slave trade in particular was a significant and morally troubling aspect of the Viking economy, with captives taken in raids or warfare being sold in markets across Europe and the Middle East. This is a darker side of the commerce you now engage in, and one you grapple with, trying where possible to deal in goods rather than people, though the pervasiveness of slavery in this era is an unavoidable reality. One winter, while staying in a large fortified trading post near modern-day Kiev, a new opportunity, or perhaps a new yearning, begins to stir within you. For years you've heard tales, whispered around campfires and in mead halls, of lands even further west, beyond the great ocean, beyond even Iceland and Greenland. Tales of a place called Vinland, a land of wild grapes, towering trees, and self-sown wheat, supposedly discovered by Leif Erikson some generations ago. Most dismiss these as sailors' exaggerations, fanciful stories to pass the long nights, but some, especially those with connections to the far western settlements in Greenland, insist they are true. You encounter a Greenlander trader, a weathered man named Thorfinn, whose grandfather was said to have been part of one of those early ill-fated Vinland expeditions. He speaks with a quiet conviction about the richness of this western land, but also of the dangers, the harsh conditions, and the difficult encounters with the native inhabitants, who the Norse called Skrælingar. He speaks of the immense challenge of establishing a lasting settlement so far from home, so isolated. His words plant a seed in your mind. You're comfortable now, respected, relatively prosperous. You could continue this life of an Eastern trader indefinitely, but the old restlessness, the desire for the unknown, for the horizon, begins to stir again. It's different from the youthful craving for battle glory, and different too from the ambition for trading wealth. This feels more like a pull towards the edge of the map, a desire to see what lies beyond the known. Perhaps it's the call of your Viking blood, the ancestral urge to explore, to venture into the youth of the outer sea. Historians still argue about the exact location and extent of the Viking settlements in Vinland. The archaeological site at Lonso Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, discovered in the 1960s, provides concrete evidence of a Norse presence in North America around 1000 AD, confirming the essence of the saga accounts. However, the full scope of their exploration and the nature of their interactions with indigenous peoples remain subjects of ongoing research and debate. You find yourself spending more time with Thorfinn, listening to his stories, studying the crude maps he sometimes sketches in the dirt, maps based on memory and hearsay rather than precise cartography. He speaks of the immense forests, the abundant game, the unfamiliar climate. He also speaks of the formidable Skrælingar, their strange customs, and their fierce resistance to the Norse presence. It sounds like a land of immense promise and equally immense peril. A land that would test every skill, every ounce of resilience you possess. A quirky tidbit: the Vinland sagas, the saga of the Greenlanders, and Eric the Red saga, which recount these voyages, mention that one of the reasons the early Vinland settlements failed was internal strife among the Norse settlers themselves, often over resources or women, as well as conflict with the native population. It seems even in a new world, old human failings travelled with them. You'd have to make sure any expedition you joined wasn't composed entirely of people who couldn't agree on what to have for dinner, let alone build a new society. The idea takes root, growing from a fanciful notion into a tangible possibility. Beyond the battlefield, beyond the established trade routes, lies this new, ultimate frontier. It would mean leaving behind the relative security and prosperity you've built in the East. It would mean facing dangers far greater than treacherous rapids or rival traders. It would be a monumental gamble. You reflect on your journey, the farm girl, the Shieldmaiden, the raider, the trader, the leader. Each phase has taught you, shaped you. The limp is a constant reminder of your vulnerability, but also of your capacity to overcome. Perhaps all these experiences have been a preparation for something even greater, something that requires not just courage or shrewdness, but a deep well of endurance and a willingness to face the truly unknown. The whispers of steel have long faded, replaced by the hum of commerce and the murmur of diplomacy. But now a new call echoes, faint but insistent, the call of the Western Ocean, the lure of Vinland. The path beyond the battlefield is leading you to the very edge of the world. The lure of Vinland, once a distant whisper, grows into a compelling call that you can no longer ignore. The stories Thorfinn, the Greenlander trader, tells are not just of fertile lands and abundant resources, but of an ultimate challenge, a true journey into the unknown. It speaks to the core of your Viking spirit, that restless urge to explore, to push boundaries, to see what lies over the next horizon, or in this case, across a vast and largely uncharted ocean. You've faced down warriors, navigated treacherous rivers, and built a successful trading enterprise from scratch. What is one more impossible-sounding venture? Famous last words, perhaps. You make your decision. You carefully settle your affairs in the East. This means transferring responsibilities within Rurik's network, ensuring the routes you established will continue to function, and saying farewell to the life you've built over many years. Rurik, though sad to see you go, understands. He has seen that restless spark in your eyes before. The Western Sea, eh? He says, stroking his beard. A bold choice. Some say it's a path to glory, others to an unmarked grave. Be sure you know which one you're sailing towards. He gifts you a finely crafted compass, a rare and valuable item acquired from a southern trader, a tool that works by the sun and stars, far more reliable than just squinting and guessing. May it guide you true, he says, a genuine warmth in his voice. Your journey west is an expedition in itself. You travel back along the familiar river routes, then overland, eventually reaching one of the major trading ports on the Baltic coast, perhaps Birka or Hedeby. Here, you seek out Greenlanders, or Icelanders with connections to the Greenland settlements. It takes time, patience, and a good portion of the wealth you've accumulated. You're not just looking for passage, you're looking to join, or perhaps even help initiate, an actual Vinland expedition. These are not common. The Greenland colony itself is a marginal existence, and ventures further west are risky and expensive. Eventually your inquiries lead you to a man named Einar Thorgilsson, a stern, ambitious Greenlander who is trying to gather resources and crew for a new attempt at establishing a permanent settlement in Vinland. He's heard tales of your exploits in the east, your reputation as a shrewd leader and a survivor. Your limp, which some might see as a weakness, he views with a certain respect. It speaks of experience and resilience. He's less interested in your past as a Shieldmaiden, and more in your proven ability to manage people and resources in challenging environments. He's also impressed by the silver you're willing to invest in the venture. This isn't just about joining, it's about becoming a stakeholder. The preparations for the Vinland voyage are immense. Unlike a raiding trip or a coastal trading journey, this is a deep-sea voyage into largely unknown waters, followed by the monumental task of building a self-sufficient settlement in a wilderness. You need a sturdy ship, a Knarr, the workhorse cargo vessel of the Vikings, broader and deeper than a longship, designed for carrying heavy loads over long ocean distances. You need provisions for months, perhaps years, preserved food, livestock, goats, sheep, perhaps a cow, all of which will have a terrible time on the voyage. Tools of every kind, axes, saws, adzes, nails, smithing equipment, seeds for planting, fishing gear, weapons for hunting and defence. And most importantly, you need the right people. Skilled sailors, carpenters, smiths, farmers, hunters, and women, for a true settlement cannot be built by men alone. It's like planning the ultimate off-grid camping trip, but with the distinct possibility of never coming home, and having to fight off more than just mosquitoes. You throw yourself into the preparations, your organisational skills honed by years of managing trading caravans proving invaluable. You help select the crew, looking for resilience and practical skills over boastful talk. You oversee the loading of supplies, ensuring everything is stowed securely for the rough Atlantic crossing. You even consult with Einar on the design of some prefabricated building sections, intended to speed up the construction of initial shelters once you make landfall. A historical fact, the Viking voyages to Greenland and Vinland were incredible feats of navigation and seamanship. They sailed without modern instruments, relying on their knowledge of currents, winds, bird migrations, and the sun and stars. The journey from Norway to Greenland could take several weeks, and from Greenland to Vinland perhaps another week or more, depending on the route and conditions. These were not undertaken lightly. Finally, the day of departure arrives. The Vinland venture, as Einar has somewhat optimistically named the Knarr, is loaded to the gunwales. The crew is a mix of hopeful Greenlanders, adventurous Icelanders, and a few hardy souls from Norway, including yourself. There's a sense of excitement, but also a profound solemnity. You're leaving the known world behind. As the coastline of Scandinavia, and later Iceland, fades into the mist behind you, you feel a pang of, not regret, but a deep awareness of the immensity of what you're undertaking. The voyage across the North Atlantic is an ordeal. The Knarr, though sturdy, is buffeted by storms that last for days, huge waves crashing over the deck, drenching everything and everyone. Seasickness is rampant. The livestock suffer terribly. The cramped conditions, the constant damp, the monotonous diet, all take their toll on morale. You work alongside the crew, helping with the sails, taking your turn at the steering oar, tending to the sick, your presence a calm and steadying influence. Your past experiences, enduring storms on the Sea Serpent, the hardships of the River Road, the long winter of your injury, have prepared you for this. You know that endurance is as much a mental game as a physical one. A quirky or fringe tidbit. Some theories suggest that Viking navigators may have used the shadow stick, a vertical stick whose shadow length and direction at noon could help determine latitude, or even kept birds like ravens aboard, releasing them to see if they flew towards land, thus indicating its direction. The sagas mention ravens being used in this way by Floki Vilgerdarson, one of the early explorers of Iceland. You hope Einar has a few well-trained birds, or at least a very good sense of direction. After weeks at sea, enduring terrifying storms and periods of unnerving, windless calm where you drift helplessly, the signs of land begin to appear, floating driftwood, land-based birds, a change in the colour and smell of the water. Then, one misty morning, a cry from the lookout, "Land! Land ahead!" Through the swirling grey you see it, a dark forested coastline, rugged and unfamiliar, stretching as far as the eye can see. This is it, Vinland. A wave of emotion washes over the crew. Relief, excitement, apprehension. You have reached the fabled land across the western sea. The first great hurdle is overcome, but as you stare at that wild, untamed shore, you know that the real challenges are only just beginning. The Vinland venture has truly beckoned, and you have answered. Now you must make it home. The sight of the Vinland coast, a rugged, tree-lined shore emerging from the Atlantic mists, brings a momentary surge of triumph, but it's quickly tempered by the daunting reality of what lies ahead. This is no welcoming harbour, no established port. This is a wilderness, vast and indifferent, beautiful in its raw, untamed state, but also potentially hostile. Einar Thorgilsson, the expedition leader, directs the Vinland venture along the coast, searching for a suitable place to make landfall. A sheltered bay with fresh water, good timber resources, and hopefully defensible terrain. Your input, based on your experience choosing campsites and defensible positions along the eastern rivers, is sought and valued. After a few days of careful exploration, you find a promising location, a wide, south-facing cove with a river emptying into it, flanked by rolling hills covered in dense mixed forest. There's a relatively flat area near the river mouth suitable for building, and the surrounding hills offer good vantage points. The decision is made. This will be your new home, or at least your first foothold in this new world. You can almost hear the local wildlife sighing. Well, there goes the neighbourhood. The Knarr is carefully anchored, and the first boats are lowered to ferry people and essential supplies ashore. Stepping onto the soil of Vinland for the first time is a profound moment. The air smells different, of damp earth, pine, and unfamiliar vegetation. The sounds are different too. Strange bird calls, the rustling of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. It feels ancient, untouched. You plant your staff firmly in the ground, a symbolic gesture of arrival, of intent. The first priority is shelter. The prefabricated sections of longhouses you brought are unloaded and assembled with frantic haste. Everyone, man and woman, throws themselves into the work. Trees are felled with ringing axe blows. Your own axe, though mostly a symbol now, finds practical use again. Timber is shaped, walls are raised, turf is cut to roof the simple sturdy structures. It's gruelling, back-breaking labour from dawn till dusk. Your limp aches, but you work alongside the others, your determination inspiring those around you. You're not just building houses, you're building hope. You help organise the work crews, assign tasks, and manage the dwindling supplies from the ship. Your experience in logistics is crucial. Food is carefully rationed. Hunting parties are sent out, returning with deer, caribou, and strange large birds you don't recognise. Fishing in the river and the cove proves fruitful. Berries and edible plants are gathered, though caution is exercised as some are unfamiliar and potentially poisonous. Every day is a struggle for survival, a race against the coming winter, which according to Thorfinn's tales can be harsh in this new land. The challenges are immense. Tools break and must be painstakingly repaired by the smith. Sickness strikes, and your limited knowledge of healing, supplemented by what little Zariah taught you, and the common sense remedies passed down through generations, is stretched to its limits. Accidents happen, a misplaced axe blow, a fall from a half-finished roof. Fear is a constant undercurrent. Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of the Skrælingar, the native inhabitants whom you have not yet encountered, but whose presence is felt in subtle signs. Old fire pits, strangely marked trees, a fleeting glimpse of a figure disappearing into the forest. A historical fact. The Norse settlement at Lonso Meadows in Newfoundland, believed to be a temporary base camp or a way station for further exploration, consisted of several turf-walled longhouses similar in construction to those found in Greenland and Iceland. It included workshops for carpentry and ironworking, indicating a self-sufficient if small-scale operation. The very existence of this site proves the sagas weren't just tall tales. You find yourself taking on a role that combines practical leadership with a kind of maternal oversight. You mediate disputes that flare up among the stressed and weary settlers, arguments over food rations, tool sharing, or perceived slights. You offer encouragement when spirits flag. You remind them of why they came, of the dream of building a new life in this rich land. Your quiet strength, your proven resilience, makes you a natural focal point. Einar is the overall leader, the decision-maker, but you're often the one who smooths ruffled feathers, who listens to grievances, who keeps the fragile fabric of the small community from tearing apart. One evening, as you sit by the communal fire mending a fishing net, a young woman named Astrid, a common name it seems, and one that always gives you a pang for your mother, approaches you, her face etched with worry. Her young son is ill with a fever, and she fears the worst. You go with her to their small, smoky section of the longhouse. You examine the child, your touch gentle. You prepare a willow bark infusion, as Zoria might have done, and a cooling compress for his forehead. You sit with Astrid through the long night, offering what comfort you can. By morning the fever has broken. Astrid's gratitude is immense. It's a small victory, but in this precarious existence, small victories are precious. A quirky tidbit from the Vinland sagas is the story of Freydis Eiriksdottir, Eric the Red's daughter, and Leif Eriksson's half-sister. She's portrayed as a formidable, even ruthless figure in some accounts, leading her own expedition to Vinland and not hesitating to use violence and treachery to achieve her aims. It's a reminder that Norse women, when they did venture into these new lands, were not always demure helpmeets, but could be as ambitious and formidable as any man. You hope your own leadership style leans less towards ruthless treachery and more towards competent and occasionally brings snacks. As the days shorten and the air grows colder, the first permanent longhouse is completed, a sturdy if rough structure that offers shelter from the elements. A palisade of sharpened logs is slowly being erected around the small cluster of buildings. The Vinland venture is carefully beached and covered, protected for the winter. You have survived the first few months. You have shelter, a small store of food, and a fragile, hopeful community. But the vast, silent wilderness surrounds you, and the question of the Skrælingar hangs heavy in the air. This new world is beautiful, bountiful, but it does not yet feel like home. It feels like a place you are borrowing on uncertain terms. The trials of establishing a settlement have only just begun, and the greatest tests are yet to come. The first Vinland winter descends with a biting ferocity that tests the limits of your small settlement's preparations. Snow blankets the landscape, deep and unrelenting, isolating your small cluster of turf-roofed longhouses huddled by the frozen river. The wind howls through the forest, a mournful sound that seems to echo the vast emptiness surrounding you. Days are short, nights interminably long. The communal longhouse, though smoky and crowded, becomes the heart of your world, a refuge against the cold and the encroaching darkness. Food becomes the primary concern. The hunted game and dried fish stores dwindle faster than anticipated. Hunting parties venture out into the frozen wilderness, often returning empty-handed or with meagre kills, the animals themselves struggling to survive the harsh conditions. Ice fishing on the river provides some sustenance, but it's a cold, miserable and often unproductive task. Hunger gnaws at the edges of the community, fraying tempers and stoking fears. You, Einar, and the other leaders implement strict rationing, a deeply unpopular but necessary measure. You remember the lean winters of your childhood on the fjord, but this feels different, more precarious. There are no nearby farms to turn to for aid, no established trade networks to rely on. You are utterly alone. It is during this long, hungry winter that you have your first significant encounter with the Skrælingar, the indigenous people of this land. Up until now, there had only been fleeting glimpses, mysterious signs, a broken arrow shaft found in the woods, a wisp of smoke seen far in the distance. But one grey, overcast afternoon, as a group of settlers are attempting to clear more trees near the edge of the forest, a hunting party of native men emerges silently from the dense woods. They are unlike anyone you have ever seen. Their skin is reddish-brown, their hair dark and straight. They're clad in furs and hides, carrying bows and stone-tipped arrows, their faces painted with intricate designs. They are smaller in stature than most Norsemen, but they move with a lithe, animal grace, perfectly at home in this frozen landscape. There are perhaps a dozen of them, and they observe your work party with an unnerving stillness, their expressions unreadable. Fear, sharp and cold, grips the settlers. Axes are raised defensively. Shouted warnings are exchanged, though neither side understands the other's language. The situation is incredibly tense. A single wrong move could ignite a bloody conflict. You're not with the work party, but word quickly reaches the main settlement, and Einar, along with a handful of armed men, including yourself, your staff in one hand, your axe now firmly in the other, just in case, hurries to the scene. When you arrive, the two groups are facing each other, a frozen tableau of mutual suspicion and hostility. You see the fear in the eyes of your own people, and something that looks like wary curiosity, perhaps mixed with a touch of menace, in the eyes of the Skrælingar. Remembering your experiences negotiating with diverse tribes in the east, you know that immediate aggression is likely the worst possible response. Einar is all for a show of force to intimidate them into retreating. But you lay a restraining hand on his arm. Wait, you urge him. Let us try to show we mean no harm, at least for now. They are on their own land. We are the intruders. Slowly, cautiously, you step forward, alone, holding your hands out, palms open, to show you're not immediately threatening. You make sure your axe is visible, but not brandished. It's a delicate balance, appearing non-hostile, but not weak. You offer a slight inclination of your head, a gesture of acknowledgement. The Skrælingar watch you, their dark eyes unwavering. Then to his own party, and with a final lingering look, they melt back into the trees as silently as they appeared. A collective sigh of relief goes through your group. The immediate crisis has passed, but the encounter leaves everyone shaken. The Skrælingar are real, they are here, and their intentions are unknown. Historians still argue about the nature of Norse indigenous relations in Vinland. The sagas portray a mixed bag. Initial attempts at trade, followed by misunderstandings, escalating violence, and eventual Norse withdrawal, partly due to the hostility of the native population, whom they were unable to dominate or displace. The archaeological evidence at Longhouses Meadows is limited on this front, but the site's defensible position suggests an awareness of potential conflict. This first encounter leads to a period of uneasy coexistence. There are more sightings, occasional brief meetings at a distance. Attempts at trade are made. The Norse offer iron, tools and woolen cloth. The Skrælingar in turn offer furs. A quirky tidbit from the sagas. One story tells of the Skrælingar being fascinated by milk, which they had never encountered, but then being terrified by the bellowing of a Norse bull, which they mistook for a malevolent spirit, leading to a breakdown in trade and renewed hostilities. It highlights the vast cultural gulf and the potential for even minor misunderstandings to escalate. You make a mental note to keep any bulls you might acquire well away from future trading sessions, and maybe hide the milk just in case. You become one of the primary points of contact with the Skrælingar, partly because of your calm demeanour during that first encounter, and partly because you seem to have a knack for interpreting their gestures and intentions, even without a shared language. You learn a few of their words, they learn a few of yours. A fragile, tentative understanding begins to form, though it's always underscored by a deep-seated mistrust on both sides. You trade for much-needed fresh meat and furs, which helps your settlement survive the rest of the brutal winter. However, not all encounters are peaceful. A group of young, hot-headed Norsemen, against Einar's orders, ventures too far into Skrælingar territory and attempts to steal furs from a cache. They are ambushed, and two are killed. This incident shatters the fragile peace. The Skrælingar become more overtly hostile. Attacks on the settlement's periphery increase. The dream of peaceful coexistence seems to be dying. You find yourself caught in the middle, trying to advocate for caution and diplomacy with Einar, who is increasingly leaning towards aggressive retaliation, while also knowing that your people must defend themselves. The complexities of these interactions are immense. You're a stranger in their land, your very presence a disruption. Yet, your people need to survive. There are no easy answers, no clear moral high ground. The Vinland venture is proving to be a far more complicated tapestry of human interaction and survival than the sagas ever fully conveyed. The challenges are not just environmental, but deeply, tragically human. The fragile peace, shattered by the ill-fated theft and the subsequent Norse deaths, gives way to a period of simmering hostility and sporadic violent clashes with the Skrælingar. The dream of a prosperous new Vinland, built on peaceful coexistence and bountiful harvests, begins to feel like a naive fantasy. The reality is a struggle for survival in a land that, while rich, is also contested. Your small settlement, which you've named Hop, meaning tidal lagoon or small bay, a common Norse place name element, and one mentioned in the sagas for a Vinland settlement, feels more like a besieged outpost than a thriving new home. Einar Thorgilsson, deeply angered by the loss of his men and the increasing boldness of the Skrælingar attacks, pushes for a more aggressive stance. He organises retaliatory raids, small swift strikes against any native groups encountered near your territory. You argue against this, advocating for a defensive posture, for strengthening your palisade and focusing on self-sufficiency, rather than escalating the conflict. You remind him of the sagas, where such aggression often led to disastrous consequences for the Norse. "We are too few, Einar," you plead. "We cannot win a war of attrition against people who know this land far better than we do. Our strength lies in endurance, not conquest here." But Einar, his pride wounded, and his authority challenged by the losses, is deaf to your counsel. He sees your caution as weakness, perhaps even a betrayal of your warrior past. The memory of your effectiveness in the Angle land raid is, for him, a reason you should support his aggressive tactics. He doesn't fully grasp how your experiences since then, the injury, the years of trade and diplomacy in the East, have reshaped your understanding of conflict and survival. It's a bit like trying to convince a hungry bear that honey is better acquired through beekeeping than by smashing the hive. His instincts scream otherwise. The retaliatory raids are largely ineffective. The Skrælingar are elusive, fading into the vast forests, only to reappear and harass your hunting parties, or attempt to set fire to your outlying storage huts. The cycle of violence deepens the enmity, morale within the settlement plummets. The settlers are weary of the constant fear, the endless work, and the growing sense of hopelessness. Some begin to talk openly of abandoning Vinland and returning to Greenland, or even to Iceland or Norway. The dream is dying. Amidst this turmoil, you focus your energies on the practicalities of survival, on the tasks that can offer some semblance of stability and future. You trade your warrior's axe not for a sword, but for an axe of a different kind, the felling axe, the broad axe, the adze. You throw yourself into the work of building, of improving the settlement's infrastructure. You work with the carpenters to expand the Longhouses, to build more secure storage facilities, to strengthen the palisade. You help clear land for planting, though the first attempts at cultivating the Norse grains, barley and rye, brought from home are largely disappointing. The climate and soil are different, and your agricultural knowledge, learned on a Norwegian fjord, is not entirely transferable here. A historical fact: the Vinland sagas mention attempts to cultivate grain, but also the abundance of wild resources like grapes, hence Vinland, timber, and game. It's likely that any successful long-term Norse settlement would have had to adapt its agricultural practices significantly and rely heavily on local resources. The failure to do so effectively may have been another contributing factor to the abandonment of the settlements. You focus on what does work. You organise fishing expeditions, which provide a more reliable source of food than hunting. You encourage the gathering of wild edibles, the self-sown wheat, likely a type of wild rye or limegrass, the berries, nuts, and various roots that the Skrælingar clearly thrive on, though you learn about these cautiously, always wary of poisonous lookalikes. You direct the construction of a small, efficient smokehouse to preserve fish and meat, extending your food supply. Your leadership in these practical matters provides a quiet counterpoint to Einar's increasingly erratic and aggressive military ventures. While he focuses on fighting the Skrælingar, you focus on fighting hunger and despair. Many of the settlers, particularly the women and the older men, begin to look to you for guidance, for a sense of purpose beyond the endless conflict. They see that your efforts are aimed at building a sustainable future, not just winning the next skirmish. One day, working to clear a stubborn patch of land near the river for a new vegetable garden, a small attempt to grow some of the hardier greens and root vegetables you remember from Zuria's village, you unearth a curiously shaped stone. It's smooth, clearly worked by human hands, with a hole drilled through one end. It's a net sinker, or perhaps a spindle whorl, of Skrælingar origin, lost or discarded long ago. Holding it in your hand, you feel a strange connection to the people who lived here before you, who knew this land, who fished this river. It's a poignant reminder that you are treading on ancient ground. in a story much older than your own. A quirky or fringe tidbit. Some researchers have speculated that the Skrælingar encountered by the Norse in Vinland may have been ancestors of the Beorthuk people of Newfoundland, or perhaps the Mi'kmaq or Innu. The term Skrælingar itself is somewhat derogatory, possibly meaning screamers or wretches, reflecting the often hostile Norse perception. Historians still argue about the precise identity and cultural affiliations of these groups, based on the limited saga descriptions and archaeological evidence. Despite your best efforts, the situation in Hop deteriorates. Another harsh winter looms, and the conflict with the Skrælingar has severely hampered preparations. Supplies are dangerously low. Einar, his authority crumbling after several failed raids and mounting losses, becomes more withdrawn, more prone to angry outbursts. The unity of the settlement is fracturing. It becomes clear to you and to many others that this venture, at least under its current leadership and in its current form, is doomed. The dream of a permanent Vinland colony, like so many before it according to Thorfinn's grandfather's tales, is collapsing under the weight of internal strife and external pressure. You have traded your warrior's axe for a builder's axe. You have toiled to create a future, but some battles cannot be won by building alone, especially when the foundations are crumbling from within. The focus shifts from building a new world to simply surviving long enough to escape it. The toil of the homestead builder has been a bitter lesson in the limits of determination, when faced with overwhelming odds and flawed leadership. The wild beauty of Vinland, which once seemed so full of promise, now feels like a beautiful, deadly trap. Your axe, whether for war or for wood, has not been enough. Something more, or something different, is needed if any of you are to see Greenland or Iceland again. The mood in Hop grows increasingly bleak as the second Vinland winter approaches. The failed retaliatory raids, the dwindling supplies, and the constant, wearing tension with the Skrælingar have eroded Einar Thorgilsson's authority and the settlers' morale. Hope, once a flickering flame, is now a guttering ember, threatening to be extinguished by the harsh winds of reality. You see despair in the eyes of your fellow settlers, a weary resignation replacing the adventurous spirit that brought you all to this distant shore. It's clear that Hop is not sustainable, not as it is. The talk now is not of expansion, but of escape. During this period of deepening crisis, you find yourself drawn to the older ways, the beliefs and practices that sustained your ancestors through countless hardships. The new faith, Christianity, has been making inroads in Scandinavia, and even among the Greenlanders, but for many, especially in moments of extreme stress, the old gods and the ancient magic still hold power. You think of your grandmother Sigrid, her quiet wisdom, her knowledge of the runes and the hidden forces of the world. You remember her teaching you that the runes were not just an alphabet, but keys to understanding, to influencing fate, if one had the will and the knowledge. There is an older woman in the settlement named Groa. She is quiet, reclusive, and some whisper that she is a Völva, a seeress, a woman who can communicate with the spirits, see into the future, and work magic. In more prosperous, stable times, such women might be respected, feared, or even persecuted depending on the prevailing attitudes. But now, with the community teetering on the brink, people are desperate for any source of guidance, any glimmer of hope that doesn't involve Einar's increasingly futile plans. Groa had been mostly on the fringes, her ways seen as a bit too old country, by some of the more modern Greenlanders who were nominally Christian. You, however, remember your grandmother's reverence for these traditions. You seek Groa out. Her dwelling is small, at the very edge of the settlement, almost blending into the forest. The air inside is thick with the scent of unfamiliar herbs and wood smoke. Groa is ancient, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, her eyes unnervingly bright and perceptive. She watches you approach, a faint knowing smile on her lips, as if she's been expecting you. The threads of fate are tangled. Shieldmaiden trader builder, she says, her voice a dry rustle like autumn leaves. You come seeking to unknot them, or perhaps to weave a new pattern. You speak to her of your fears for the settlement, of the dwindling hope, of the need for a different kind of wisdom than that offered by axe or account book. You ask her if there is any way to see what lies ahead, any guidance the old powers might offer. You're not asking for miracles, but for clarity, for a path through the encroaching darkness. Groa listens patiently, then she nods. There are rituals, she says, ways to open the paths between the worlds, but they require courage and a willingness to face whatever truths are revealed. The Norns weave as they will, but sometimes they allow a glimpse of their loom. She agrees to perform a Seiðr ceremony, a powerful and complex form of Norse magic, often associated with prophecy and divination. This is not something undertaken lightly. Seiðr was considered potent, and by some unmanly, often being the domain of women. A historical fact. The practice of Seiðr is described in various sagas and historical accounts, often involving a raised platform for the seeress, special chants or songs, galdra, and sometimes a staff and other ritual implements. It was believed to allow the practitioner to journey in spirit, to communicate with gods or spirits, and to gain hidden knowledge. Odin himself was said to be a master of Seiðr, though it was also sometimes viewed with suspicion, especially as Christianity spread. The ceremony is held in the main longhouse, cleared of its usual clutter. A sense of hushed anticipation, mixed with fear and skepticism, fills the room as the settlers gather. Groa, dressed in a dark cloak adorned with strange symbols and carrying a carved staff, mounts a small, specially constructed platform. Her assistants, a few other older women, begin a low, monotonous chant, a song that seems to pull at the edges of your consciousness. The only light comes from flickering tallow lamps, casting long, dancing shadows. Groa enters a trance. Her body sways, her eyes roll back and her voice changes, becoming deeper, more resonant, as if other voices are speaking through her. She chants in an ancient form of the Norse tongue, words you only partially understand, invoking Odin, Freyja, goddess often associated with Seiðr, and the Norns who weave the fate of all beings. The atmosphere in the longhouse becomes thick, charged, almost electric. You feel the hairs on your arms stand on end. It's a world away from the pragmatic realities of trade or building. This is a journey into the mystical heart of your culture. Then she begins to speak of what she sees. Her prophecies are veiled, symbolic, open to interpretation, as such pronouncements often are. She speaks of a ship of nails, Naglfari, the ship of the dead in Ragnarok, or perhaps just a warning of impending doom for your ship, of ice closing in, of blood on the snow, but also of a narrow escape through a hidden way, and a return to Greenlands, though not the ones first sought. She speaks of a choice between holding on and letting go, and that survival lies in knowing when the season has turned. Historians still argue about the true nature and efficacy of Seiðr. Was it genuine shamanistic practice, a form of mass suggestion, or elaborate performance? Regardless, its psychological impact on a community facing crisis could have been profound, offering a framework for understanding their plight and perhaps a sense of direction, however cryptic. You, watching Groa, feel a primal connection to these ancient rites, a sense of tapping into something far older and deeper than your own individual struggles. After what seems like hours, Groa collapses, exhausted, her assistants rushing to her side. The chanting stops. Silence descends, heavy and profound. The settlers slowly disperse, some visibly shaken, others muttering amongst themselves, trying to decipher the seeress's words. For you, Groa's vision, though fragmented, brings a strange kind of clarity. Blood on the snow and ice closing in seem to confirm your fears about the coming winter and the escalating conflict. But a narrow escape through a hidden way and survival lies in knowing when the season has turned resonate deeply. It reinforces your growing conviction that the time to leave Hop is now, before the winter traps you completely, before Einar's aggression leads to a final, unwinnable confrontation. The return to Greenlands, though not the ones first sought, suggests that even if Vinland is a failure, there is still a future, perhaps back in Greenland, or even Iceland. You seek out Einar. He is dismissive of Groa's prophecy, calling it women's hysteria. But you are resolute. You speak to the other settlers, quietly, persuasively, sharing your interpretation of the seeress's words, appealing to their own fears and their desperate desire for survival. You remind them of the sagas, where wise leaders knew when to cut their losses, when to retreat to fight another day, or live another life. Slowly, a consensus begins to form, independent of Einar. The people are looking to you, not him, for a way out. A quirky tidbit, runestones, often erected as memorials, sometimes contained cryptic inscriptions or curses, hinting at a widespread belief in the power of written symbols and magical language. The idea that a seeress could tap into hidden knowledge was deeply ingrained. You might not be carving a runestone, but you're trying to interpret a living, breathing prophecy, which feels even more high stakes. The decision is made largely by popular will, overriding Einar's increasingly desperate objections. You will repair the Vinland venture as best you can, and attempt the perilous journey back to Greenland as soon as a window of favourable weather appears before the worst of the winter storms make sea travel impossible. The path of the seeress, the old magic, has offered not a magical solution, but a catalyst for decision, a framework for collective action. Your exploration of these mystical traditions has, paradoxically, led to a very pragmatic plan for survival. The toil of the builder gives way to the urgent work of the shipwright and the navigator, as you prepare to abandon the dream of Vinland. The decision to abandon Hop and attempt to return to Greenland hangs heavy in the crisp autumn air, yet it's also accompanied by a surge of desperate energy. The cryptic pronouncements of Groa, the seeress, combined with your own pragmatic assessment of the dwindling supplies and escalating conflict with the Skrælingar, have galvanized the majority of the settlers. Einar Thorgilsson, his authority now almost completely eroded, sulks in his longhouse, offering little help and much bitter commentary, but he no longer has the power to stop the preparations. The leadership has effectively, if informally, shifted to you and a small council of the more experienced and level-headed settlers. The primary task is repairing and refitting the Vinland venture. The Knarr has been beached for many months, exposed to the elements, and needs significant work to be seaworthy for a treacherous North Atlantic crossing so late in the season. Trees are felled, not for new longhouses, but for planks to patch the hull, for a new mast to replace one damaged in a summer storm, and for sturdy oars. The settlement's blacksmith, a grim-faced man named Brand, works day and night at his small forge, repairing iron fittings, forging new nails, and sharpening tools. Every settler with any skill in carpentry, rope-making, or sail-mending is pressed into service. It's a race against time, against the rapidly approaching winter, and against the ever-present threat of Skrælingar attack. You're essentially trying to get a very large, very leaky wooden bucket ready to cross a very angry ocean before everyone freezes or gets turned into a pincushion. You're everywhere, organising work crews, rationing the last of the food supplies with an iron will, mediating disputes over scarce resources, and coordinating the defence of the settlement during the frantic preparations. Your limp is a constant ache, but you ignore it, driven by a fierce determination to see your people safely away from this failed dream. Your past experiences, leading trading caravans, managing logistics, even your warrior training in assessing threats and maintaining discipline, all come into play. One of your most successful, if temporary, initiatives is to re-establish a fragile, purely transactional truce with a nearby band of Skrælingar. Using the few words of their language you've learned and a great deal of careful gesturing, you manage to negotiate a trade. Your last remaining iron axe heads and knives, items they greatly coveted, in exchange for a large quantity of dried meat, smoked fish, and, crucially, information about the prevailing winds and currents along the coast at this time of year. It's a risky gamble, meeting with them outside the palisade with only a small, lightly armed escort, but it pays off. The food extends your rapidly diminishing stores, and their local knowledge of the coastal waters is invaluable. Einar calls you a fool for arming the enemy, but you know that those few iron tools will make little difference in the long run, while the food and information could mean the difference between life and death for your people. This deal is a testament to your growing understanding that survival sometimes means engaging with those you might otherwise consider foes, finding common ground where only hostility existed. A historical fact: the Vinland sagas do describe some instances of trade between the Norse and the Skrælingar, often involving furs from the native side and cloth or metal goods from the Norse. However, these interactions were frequently fraught with misunderstanding and quickly devolved into conflict, highlighting the immense cultural and technological gulfs between the two groups. Your temporary truce is a rare success in this difficult context. As the Vinland venture nears readiness, the task of deciding who and what will make the journey becomes paramount. The ship cannot carry everyone who originally came, nor all their belongings. Some of the livestock will have to be left behind. Hard choices must be made. You oversee a lottery for the limited space, weighted to prioritise families with young children and those with essential skills for the voyage. It's a heartbreaking process, watching people forced to leave behind precious possessions, tools they will need in Greenland, or even beloved animals. But there is no alternative. A quirky tidbit: Viking ships, even cargo vessels like Knarr's, were often surprisingly flexible in their construction. This flexibility helped them withstand the stresses of rough seas, but it also meant they could work or flex quite a bit, leading to leaks. Constant bailing was a normal part of any long voyage. You make sure the bailing buckets are in good repair, they're going to get a serious workout. The day of departure is bleak and grey. A cold wind whips across the bay, and the first snowflakes of the impending winter are already swirling in the air. The settlers who are being left behind, a small group who either volunteered to stay, hoping another ship might eventually arrive, or who lost the lottery for the passage, watch from the shore, their faces a mixture of despair and stoic resignation. Einar, surprisingly, is among those choosing to stay, perhaps too proud or too broken to face the return journey as a failed leader. You leave them with what supplies can be spared, a grim and inadequate offering. Boarding the Vinland venture is a sombre affair. The ship is dangerously overloaded with people and essential provisions. There is no excitement, only a grim determination. As the ship is pushed off the beach and the oars bite into the icy water, you look back at the small, lonely settlement of Hop, at the figures on the shore dwindling in the distance. It's a place of failed dreams, of hardship and loss, but also a place where you learned profound lessons about leadership, resilience, and the complex, often tragic nature of human encounters. Groa, the old seeress, is aboard, her presence a strange comfort to many. She sits wrapped in her dark cloak, her eyes fixed on the receding Vinland shore. She had spoken of a narrow escape through a hidden way. You hope this overloaded ship sailing into the teeth of a North Atlantic autumn is that hidden way. The initial journey along the coast, guided by the information gleaned from the Skrælingar, is tense but uneventful. Then you turn the prow east towards Greenland, into the vast open ocean. The weather, true to the season, is brutal. Storms lash the ship, mountainous waves threaten to swamp you, and the cold is bone-chilling. The ship leaks constantly, and everyone, men and women, takes turns at the exhausting work of bailing and manning the pumps they'd ingeniously rigged. Sleep is snatched in brief, shivering interludes. Food is meagre, water strictly rationed. But this time, there is a different spirit aboard. Under your quiet, steady leadership, and with the shared goal of survival burning in every heart, there is a sense of grim unity. You share the hardships, you offer encouragement, you draw on every scrap of your seamanship and knowledge. Your trading post, Hop, may have failed in the grand scheme of Norse expansion, but the community you forged in its dying days, the one now fighting for survival on this storm-tossed Knarr, is a testament to something more fundamental. The prosperity you sought in trade has been replaced by the urgent currency of shared hope and mutual reliance. The journey is far from over, and the green lands Groa promised still seem a lifetime away. But you have taken the first, most difficult step. You have let go, and you are sailing towards an uncertain future, with the ghosts of Vinland at your back. The voyage from the shores of Vinland back towards Greenland is a relentless battle against the fury of the late autumn North Atlantic. The Vinland venture, overloaded and battered, groans under the assault of storm after storm. Monstrous waves, the colour of slate and capped with angry white foam, crash over the decks, threatening to sweep away anyone or anything not securely lashed down. The wind howls a ceaseless, deafening lament through the rigging. Sleep is a luxury few can afford for long, snatched in brief, shivering spells, huddled together for warmth in the cramped, damp spaces below deck, if below deck can even be said to exist in such an open vessel. The constant back-breaking labour of bailing water, manning the steering oar, and wrestling with the ice-caked sail when brief lulls allow its use, drains every ounce of strength. Food is scarce, reduced to mouthfuls of dried fish, now tasting more of salt and despair than sustenance, and hard, mouldering biscuits. Fresh water is more precious than gold, doled out in stingy rations that barely wet the tongue. Scurvy, the ancient bane of seafarers, begins to show its ugly signs. Bleeding gums, aching joints, a a profound weariness that even the constant threat of death cannot fully dispel. You recognise the symptoms from tales heard on your earlier voyages and from your time with Zariah, and you try to encourage the chewing of pine needles or any scraps of preserved berries that might offer a trace of the vital spirit that wards off the disease, though such resources are pitifully few. It's a grim irony that you escaped the land of wild grapes, only to face the ravages of a malady prevented by such fruit. Yet, amidst this crucible of suffering, a remarkable resilience takes hold. The shared ordeal forges a bond among the survivors that transcends the petty squabbles and despair that plagued Hop. Under your quiet, unwavering leadership they find a focus. You're a constant presence on deck, your staff helping you keep your footing on the heaving planks, your voice, though often hoarse from shouting over the wind, offering calm instructions and encouragement. You share your meagre rations, you take your turn at the hardest tasks, you sit with the sick and the dying, offering what comfort you can. Your own experiences, the pain of your old leg injury flaring in the cold and damp, the memory of your near drowning in the icy river, the discipline of the shield wall, all contribute to your ability to endure, to project an aura of steadfastness that helps to keep panic at bay. Groa, the old seeress, also plays a crucial role. Though physically frail, her spirit remains indomitable. She chants old Galdra, songs of protection and endurance, her voice surprisingly strong against the roar of the storm. Whether her magic has any direct effect on the waves is debatable, but its effect on morale is undeniable. Her presence is a living link to the ancestral powers, a reminder that they are not entirely abandoned in this watery hell. She shares cryptic interpretations of dreams, of omens seen in the flight of a rare seabird or the shape of a wave, offering glimmers of hope, or at least meaning, in the midst of chaos. A historical fact: survival on such Viking voyages often depended on immense psychological fortitude, as much as physical skill. The sagas are replete with accounts of crews enduring horrific conditions, their fate hanging by a thread, their survival often attributed to the leadership of one individual or the favour of the gods. The line between a successful voyage and a lost ship was perilously thin. Days and nights blur into an undifferentiated continuum of misery and effort. You lose track of time. The sun, when it briefly appears through breaks in the storm clouds, seems alien and distant. Your knowledge of navigation, learned from Runic and your own voyages, is tested to its absolute limit. The precious compass Runic gifted you as a godsend, but reading it on the violently pitching deck is a challenge in itself. You study the flight of storm petrels, the drift of seaweed, the subtle changes in the wave patterns, searching for any sign that you are still on course, that Greenland is not just a fading dream. One terrible night the mainmast, weakened by the relentless strain, cracks with a sound like a thunderclap and crashes overboard, taking a large section of the sail and rigging with it. It's a devastating blow. Now, you're almost entirely at the mercy of the currents, with only the oars, and the small jury-rigged remnants of the sail to provide steerage and minimal propulsion. Despair, cold and profound, threatens to engulf the survivors. Some weep openly, others stare blankly ahead, their spirits broken. It is then that you deliver what might be your most important speech, not with grand rhetoric, but with a quiet, fierce intensity. You gather those who can still stand, huddled in the relative shelter of the stern. "We have lost a mast," you shout over the wind, "but we have not lost ourselves. We have faced worse and survived. We are Norsemen and Norsewomen. We have crossed oceans, we have built homes in new lands. We have faced down enemies and endured hardships that would break lesser folk. Greenland is still out there. Our families, our kin, are waiting. We will not give up. We will row, we will bail, we will fight for every league of sea, for every breath in our bodies. We will survive this. We will!" Your words, raw and heartfelt, delivered by a woman who has shared every bit of their suffering, who bears the marks of past battles and a crippling injury, yet still stands defiant, have a galvanizing effect. A flicker of the old Viking fire rekindles in their eyes. They pick up the oars, they bail with renewed if desperate vigour. They fight on. A quirky, though grim, tidbit related to such desperate voyages is the occasional archaeological find of human remains on remote, uninhabited islands along Norse sailing routes, sometimes with signs of butchery, suggesting that in the most extreme circumstances, when all food was gone, survivors might have resorted to cannibalism. It's a horrifying thought, and one that underscores the absolute desperation these voyages could entail. Thankfully, your situation, while dire, has not yet reached that ultimate abyss. After what feels like an eternity, just as the last of the drinkable water is nearly gone and hope is once again dwindling to its lowest ebb, Groa, her eyes wide, points a trembling finger towards the western horizon. "Land," she whispers, her voice barely audible above the wind. "I see green hills under the snow." At first, you think it's a mirage, a cruel trick of the failing light and desperate minds. But then, others see it too. A dark line on the horizon, gradually resolving itself into the unmistakable shape of the land, snow-dusted mountains rising behind it. It is Greenland. Against all odds, you have made it. The Green Lands, though not the ones first sought, as Groa had prophesied. A wave of indescribable emotion sweeps over the ship. Relief so profound it brings tears, exhaustion so deep it's a wonder anyone can still stand, and a dazed, incredulous joy. You have cheated death. You have brought your people, or what remains of them, home. The Vinland venture ended in failure, but this voyage, this desperate flight, has been a victory of the human spirit, a testament to endurance and the stubborn refusal to yield. As the rugged coast of Greenland grows clearer, you know that your journey is not yet over, but you have passed through the darkest night and emerged, battered but unbroken, into the promise of a new dawn. The Elder's reflections on a life of extraordinary adventure are now deeply etched into your very soul, not just as memories, but as the hard-won wisdom of survival. The arrival in Greenland is less a triumphant return, and more a staggered, half-dead crawl ashore. The Vinland venture, or what's left of it, is skillfully manoeuvred by the last dregs of your crew's strength into one of the fjords of the eastern settlement, the main area of Norse habitation. The sight of familiar turf-roofed farmsteads, of shaggy Greenlandic sheep grazing on the sparse hillsides, of people rushing down to the shore, their faces a mixture of shock and concern, is almost overwhelming. You have come back from the edge of the world, from a place that for most Greenlanders exists only in fading sagas and sailors' rumours. You and your fellow survivors are a pitiable sight, emaciated, haggard, clad in rags, many suffering from scurvy and exposure. But you are alive. As you're helped to shore, your legs unsteady beneath you, you see the faces of the Greenlanders, your own people, yet strangers. There are questions, so many questions, but first, there is the urgent need for food, for warmth, for healing. The Greenlanders, though living a marginal existence themselves, are generous. They take you into their homes, share their limited provisions, tend to your sick. The next few weeks are a blur of recovery. You sleep, it seems, for days, your body finally surrendering to the profound exhaustion. You slowly regain strength. The simple, hearty food of Greenland, seal meat, seabirds, a little dairy, perhaps some precious imported grain, tasting like the finest feast. Your old leg injury, aggravated by the terrible voyage, aches relentlessly, but even that pain is a reminder that you are alive. Once you're strong enough, you tell your story. You speak to the local chieftains, to the assembled community in the small timber church. Christianity has a firmer, if still somewhat syncretic, hold here than in the wilder fringes of Vinland. You speak of the voyage to Vinland, of the beauty of the land, of the challenges of building hop. You describe the Skrælingar, their customs, the attempts at trade, the escalating conflict. You recount the decision to leave, the desperate repairs to the ship, and the harrowing return voyage. You do not spare the details of the hardships, the losses, or Einar Thorgilsson's failed leadership, though you speak of him more with sorrow than anger. You also speak of the courage and resilience of your fellow survivors, and of Groa's strange guiding wisdom. Your tale is met with a mixture of awe, skepticism, and a renewed respect for the dangers that lie across the Western Sea. The Vinland dream, which flickers perennially in the Greenlandic imagination, is once again shown to be a perilous one. Your survival, and the survival of those you brought back, is seen as something of a miracle, a testament to your leadership and fortitude. You're no longer just a trader from the east with a limp. You're the woman who went to Vinland and returned, a figure of near-legendary status. Though you feel anything but legendary. You just feel tired and old beyond your years. A historical fact. The Greenland Norse colony survived for nearly 500 years, from the late 10th century to the mid-15th century. Its eventual decline and disappearance are attributed to a combination of factors, including climate change, the Little Ice Age, conflict with the Thule Inuit migrating into the region, reduced contact with Europe, and perhaps an unwillingness or inability to fully adapt their farming practices to the deteriorating conditions. Your return from a failed Vinland venture would have been another cautionary tale in their ongoing struggle for survival. You find that Greenland, while familiar in its stark beauty, measure of respect here. Her accurate if cryptic prophecies regarding your voyage lend weight to her words, and she becomes a valued if somewhat feared wise woman in the community. She seems content, her purpose fulfilled. Many of the other survivors try to integrate back into Greenlandic life, finding spouses, joining farmsteads, their shared experience in Vinland a bond that will never be broken. As for you, your reputation as a leader, a survivor, and a woman of considerable experience in diverse lands opens unexpected doors. You're consulted by a local chieftain, a man named Gardar, who is impressed by your pragmatic wisdom and your ability to inspire loyalty. He sees in you not a broken remnant of a failed expedition, but a valuable asset to his community. He asks for your counsel on matters of trade, for Greenland still maintained a trickle of trade with Iceland and Norway, exporting walrus ivory, rope and hides, on managing resources, and even on mediating disputes within the settlement. A quirky tidbit. Walrus ivory from Greenland, often elaborately carved by Norse artisans, was a highly prized luxury good in medieval Europe, used for items like the famous Lewis chessman. This trade was vital to the Greenland colony's survival, providing the means to import essential goods like iron and timber, which were scarce in Greenland itself. Your experience in trade, even from the distant east, makes you valuable here. Years pass. You do not venture out on long voyages again. Your place is here, in Greenland. You become an elder, a respected figure in the eastern settlement. Your limp is more pronounced now, your hair streaked with grey, but your eyes still hold the keen intelligence and quiet strength that saw you through so many trials. You marry a kind, steady Greenlander, a widower with children who come to see you as a second mother. You find a measure of peace in the rhythms of farm life, in the turning of the harsh seasons, in the small joys of community. You're not a Shieldmaiden, nor a raider, nor a far-ranging trader anymore. You are simply Hild, a woman who has lived an extraordinary life and found a quiet haven at the world's end. You often sit by the fjord looking out towards the ice-choked sea, remembering the vast forests of Vinland, the bustling river ports of the east, the terror of the shield wall, the fierce joy of your youthful warrior dreams. Your life has been a tapestry woven with threads of adventure, hardship, loss, and unexpected triumphs. You have been a Shieldmaiden, a raider, a trader, an explorer, a leader, a builder, and a survivor. Your story, the tale of Hild who journeyed to the ends of the earth and back, becomes a saga in itself, told around hearth fires on long winter nights, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring call of the unknown. You have lived a life worthy of song. Your story is drawing to a close now, not with a final battle or a grand discovery, but with the quiet dignity of a life fully lived, a journey completed. The sun dips low over the Greenlandic fjord, painting the icebergs in hues of orange and purple. The wind whispers through the coarse grass, carrying the scent of the sea and the promise of snow. You pull your woolen cloak tighter, your gaze fixed on the horizon, not with longing, but with a deep, abiding peace. The tapestry is complete. The echoes of your footsteps from the fjords of your birth to the wild shores of Vinland and back to this final, peaceful haven begin to soften now. The clang of steel, the creak of oars, the cries of strange birds in unknown lands, all these sounds fade into a gentle murmur. The sharp edges of memory blur, leaving behind a sense of profound experience, of journeys undertaken and challenges met. You're a part of the sagas now, your life a verse in the long, epic poem of your people. As the last light fades from the sky, a deep tranquility settles over you, like the first gentle snow of winter, covering all the harshness, leaving only the quiet strength of endurance, the wisdom of a life lived to its fullest. Rest now, your adventures are done. The fire in the hearth of your longhouse, or perhaps just the warm glow of your bedside lamp, crackles softly, a gentle counterpoint to the fading echoes of Hild's extraordinary life. The tang of salt from distant seas, the scent of pine from virgin forests, the chill of the North Atlantic wind. All these sensations begin to recede, replaced by the familiar comfort of your own quiet space. Her journey, from the eager anticipation of a young Shieldmaiden to the weary wisdom of an elder in a remote Greenlandic settlement, has been long and arduous, filled with moments of stark terror and breathtaking beauty, of bitter loss and unexpected grace. You walked with her through the chaos of battle, felt the sting of sea spray on epic voyages, shivered in the desperate cold of uncharted lands, and perhaps learned a little of the resilience that allowed a people to not just survive, but to leave their mark on the very edges of the known world. Now, let the stories of old, the sagas whispered across centuries, lull you into a peaceful state. Let the imagined sound of distant waves become a soothing rhythm, a gentle cadence carrying you towards slumber. The adventures are over for tonight. The shield can be laid down, the oar rested. There are no more horizons to chase, no more storms to endure. Only the quiet, soft embrace of the coming sleep.